owner of the US Mega Farmest Videos Purimon para Intratnamiento Wino Infringe de Recos de Originales. Los Direcos de la Novela y la Imagen son del otro original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 601 Bullied by Fish. Kinzu gave Dale a thumbs up, and didn't say anything more, but focused on appreciating the scenery outside. Under Dale's control, the Black Hawk was not too high, just circling around the ranch about 50 to 60 meters above the ground. In Kinzu's opinion, the ranch that could not be visited in half a day usually flashed in front of Kinzu one by one in just 10 minutes, making him feel a little dazzled. Generally speaking, what do people want to do most when they get a good thing? Of course, they want to share their joy with others. So when Kinzu passed above the river, he asked Dale to stop here. Dale received Kinzu's instructions and didn't say much. He obediently lowered the Black Hawk slowly. Lin Yu, who was directing the workers to drain the water as soon as possible, was still attracted by the workers' exclamations. Following the workers' sight, Lin Yu also saw the source of the riot. A black helicopter that looked very advanced. Helicopter. Seeing the helicopter, Lin Yu's first reaction was to frown. She had never heard that Kinzu had a plane. In other words, this cool-looking helicopter was illegally imported. Just after taking out a mobile phone, Lin Yu wanted to call Kinzu to tell him. But before she could dial, she saw the helicopter door open, and a familiar figure appeared in her sight. The hand that was unlocking it was stunned. Lin Yu stared at the figure blankly. Wasn't that Kinzu? When did he buy the helicopter? And such a cool helicopter. After all, it was the boss's inspection. Lin Yu didn't have time to think too much and hurried to meet him. How is it? Lin Yu, my new car is nice, right? Seeing Lin Yu, Kinzu showed off like a child who got a new toy. Lin Yu rolled her eyes and said speechlessly, "Clean, you went to so much trouble to come here, don't tell me you came here just to show off." This. Kinzu touched his nose awkwardly. He really came here to show off. But now that Lin Yu said that, he was too embarrassed to admit it, otherwise he was really afraid that this girl would not be able to bear the stimulation and would fight him to death. Well, I just came to see how your progress is. Kinzu chuckled twice, then put his hands behind his back, pretending to be on patrol and walked towards the river, and asked at the same time, "How is it? Miss Lin, you have made so many things, can you finish it today?" Lin Yu followed behind, smiled bitterly and shook her head when she heard it. This is really a boss who doesn't care about anything. Clean, don't worry, it will definitely be finished before this afternoon. Walking along the river, enjoying the jealous or envious eyes of the workers, Kinzu couldn't help but feel complacent in his heart. When did he only look up to others with this kind of eyes? Just when he was somewhat intoxicated by this wonderful feeling, he suddenly heard a cry from Lin Yu behind him. Clean, be careful. Turning his head blankly, Kinzu asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Before he finished speaking, he felt an inexplicable chill coming from behind. Then, a stream of river water with a fishy smell poured down from behind in an irresistible manner. PFFT, PFFT. Kinzu stroked his wet hair and turned his head back in confusion. Within his sight, a large grass cart nearly 1 meter long was shaking its tail proudly. Kinzu seemed to vaguely see that this guy was laughing at him. Well, it must be a mockery. Hurry up and pump the water. I'm going to catch these guys in one net today. Kinzu roared at Lin Yu with a flushed face. Lin Yu, who had been holding back hard, couldn't hold it back any longer and laughed out loud. Moreover, the laughter grew louder and louder, making the uniformed and glasses-wearing girl laugh so hard that she was out of breath. Looking at the woman in front of him who was laughing so hard, Kinzu's face was full of black lines. If the conditions did not allow it, he really wanted to rush over. When her laughter gradually died down, Kinzu asked with a dark face, "How is it, when can you finish pumping? If not, I will help you get a few more pumps." Lin Yu suppressed her laughter and explained intermittently, "Clean, didn't I say that it will take until the evening at the earliest here, and the power has been turned to the maximum?" Ha ha. Rolling his eyes, Kinzu ignored the gloating woman, shook off his wet coat, and walked towards the helicopter with some depression. Although it didn't snow in December, it was really cold. Especially when the cold wind blew in the pasture, Kinzu felt that he was shivering all over. After getting on the co-pilot seat, Kinzu looked at Dale, who was trying not to laugh, and said helplessly, "If you want to laugh, just laugh." Don't hold it in and get sick. It would have been better if he didn't say anything. After Kinzu said this, even Erica in the back seat couldn't help laughing. Shirley, on the other hand, was more concerned about her uncle, and said with some concern, "Aunt Dale, let's go back quickly, Uncle is all wet." Hearing this, Dale stopped smiling and turned to the little girl and said, "Let's listen to the little princess and go back now." After that, Dale motioned to Kinzu to get ready. With a push of her little hand, the huge fuselage of the Black Hawk slowly left the ground. After returning to the door of the villa and stopping, Kinzu looked at the huge helicopter and scratched his head. There was no need to think about the garage, which would definitely not fit it, but he was a little worried about leaving it outside. What about the warehouse? Kinzu gestured, and the door of the warehouse didn't seem to be wide enough. After standing there thinking for a long time, Kinzu felt a little chilly until the little girl came over and pulled him inside to change clothes. After entering the villa, Kinzu's wet appearance scared Eva. Putting down the work in her hands, Eva hurriedly stepped forward and asked, "Clean, what's wrong with you?" As she said that, she glanced at Dale on the side with some doubt and asked, "Didn't you go out for a test flight? How did it become like this?" Kinzu was still thinking about where to park the helicopter, but after being asked by Eva, he lost all his mood. With an embarrassed look on his face, Kinzu waved his hand and said with a wry smile, "It's okay, I accidentally got it wet." After saying that, he didn't give Eva a chance to ask more questions and hurried upstairs. Before he was halfway there, he heard the little girl's voice coming from downstairs. "Aunt Eva, Uncle was tricked by a fish. That big fish jumped out of the river. It was so big. Aunt Dale saw it too. Don't you agree, Aunt Dale?" Kinzu paused as he listened to the little girl describing the scene downstairs in vivid detail. He was filled with tears. "Little girl, can we not be so honest?" Chapter 602. A Gentleman's Revenge. From morning to night. After taking a shower and changing into clean clothes, Kinzu walked downstairs. Without even looking at the women in the living room who were giggling, he took the key and walked to the garage. Dale shrugged with a smile, whispered a few words to Erica, and quickly followed. When Kinzu and the others drove away in the pickup truck, Erica also came to the helicopter and climbed up skillfully. As a gap slowly opened in the roof of the villa, the Black Hawk slowly moved over under Erica's control. Kinzu, who had already left the ranch, didn't know that the problem he was worried about had been solved quietly. He was now on his way to Old York's house. Yes, Old York's house. When he arrived at Old York's ranch, he didn't hesitate to signal Dale to drive in. When he saw Old York, this guy was wearing a summer suit and was working hard to clean the stables. After motioning Dale to stop the car, Kinzu got out of the car and looked at the time. He couldn't help but tease in, "Hey, man, what time is it? You haven't cleaned up yet?" Old York put down the shovel in his hand, smiled and joked, "Clean, you're the big boss, of course you don't have to worry about it, but there are only 3 or 4 of us. What should we do if we don't do it ourselves?" Kinzu laughed twice, did not respond, looked around, and asked in confusion, "Where is Little York? Why can't I see him?" Old York went to the side to wash his hands, and replied while wiping his hands, "He went to graze. While it's not too cold now, let the cows walk outside more." Kinzu nodded with relief, and didn't beat around the bush, and asked directly, "Old York, how many water pumps do you have here? Do you need them now?" Old York was stunned when he heard the words, and after reacting, he smiled and said, "I told you, Clean, you won't come if you are fine." After a pause, Old York continued, "I have 5 pumps here, but they are in the warehouse. We need to go get them." "That's great. Let's go together. I'll borrow them first." Hearing that there were 2 pumps, Kinzu said nothing and pulled Old York to get in the car. Hey, Clean, don't get excited. I'll do it myself." Being dragged into the car by Kinzu, Old York complained with a wry smile, "Clean, my old bones can't stand your tossing. If you continue like this, they will fall apart." Kinzu touched his nose and smiled awkwardly. "Look at what you said, Old York. It's not that easy for your body to fall apart." Old York rolled his eyes and ignored the bastard. Instead, he turned his head to look at the decoration inside the car. While looking at it, Old York said in admiration, "Clean, your Ford 750 is really better than my 450. When can you lend it to me?" Kinzu said unhappily, "Of course, you don't even look at it. One is a 750 and the other is a 450. How can they be the same?" Old York laughed twice and said bluntly, You know what, your 750 is good, but it is too wasteful to use it on the ranch. Only people like you who are not short of money would do this. Kinzu curled his lips. Although Old York almost said that he was a mover rich, he really had nothing to refute. Using a Ford 750 to do ranch work is indeed a bit wasteful, and the fuel consumption is relatively high. However, I'm a mover rich, what can you do to me? Thinking of this, Kinzu chuckled and said proudly, Old York, you know what, this 750 is really good at climbing hills, no matter how big or small the slope is, it's just like running on flat ground. Old York's eyes sparkled when he heard it, and he wanted to kick Kinzu off and let him drive instead. For cowboys, although horses are indispensable mounts, a powerful pickup truck is also one of their pursuits. They talked and laughed along the way and soon arrived at Old York's warehouse. After opening the warehouse door and helping Kinzu load the 5 pumps onto the pickup truck, Old York asked, Clean, why do you need this now? Didn't it just rain? There's no drought. Well, Kinzu scratched his head and finally explained, it's like this. Didn't I open an artificial river? It's not finished yet, but it was flooded by the last hurricane. Oh, so that's it. Old York nodded in realization, and then asked with concern, how is it? The loss this time is not big, right? Kinzu nodded and smiled. Fortunately, only more than 1,000 cows were lost. How about you here? Old York was shocked when he heard this. He was indeed a local tyrant from China, and he only lost more than 1,000 cows. His entire ranch didn't even have 1,000 cows. It's okay here. There are no losses of cattle and sheep, but many trees have fallen. Old York sighed and shook his head. Forget it, let's not talk about this, let's go back first. Kinzu also nodded in agreement. He still had to borrow water pumps from other families, and these 5 were not enough. Driving the pickup truck, Kinzu wandered around outside for a long time. When he returned to the ranch, there were already 20 more water pumps behind that pickup truck. This thing is indispensable for most ranches. After all, not everyone can be so rich to install a sprinkler system. When they arrived at the river, Kinzu stopped the pickup truck and called Linyu over. There are still 20 water pumps here. Please have someone install them quickly and try to get rid of the water in the river before the afternoon. Linyu didn't say much. He might still remember the joke he made on this guy just now. So when Kinzu said that, she immediately called a few workers over and started to install the water pumps. Fortunately, this thing is a foolproof operation. Just connect the pipes, connect the electricity, and set the position. Just start it. A dozen workers worked together for 10 minutes, and 20 pumps joined the work one after another. Now, 40 high-power pumps worked together, and the water in the river disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. Of course, that was just Kinzu's illusion. After all, the length of the river was there. But in this way, those Asian carp in the river that took advantage of the chaos to slip in and gill themselves were really in trouble. The river surface was full of big fish that jumped up because of the drastic changes in the water flow. The scene looked particularly spectacular. Oh, so many big guys? Kinzu was a little surprised when he saw it. The water in the river was flooded in by the rain a few days ago. He didn't expect that so many fish would slip in with it. Boss, do you want to call Will and the others to come? Dale next to him suggested. She knew Kinzu. By draining the water so quickly, wasn't he trying to attract the attention of the big fish? There's a saying that goes, a gentleman takes revenge from morning to night. Well, that's probably what it means. The busy holiday ended in the blink of an eye. Today I returned to Shanghai. It's another overnight drive. I hope there's no traffic jam. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto al mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 603 Shooting Fish Will came very quickly. Just when Kinzu was thinking about whether to braise or boil the big guy after catching it, Will rushed over with a scoop net. However, looking at the nearly 10-meter wide river surface and the river water that was still mostly full, Will was a little dumbfounded. Hey, boss, we have to get the boat over before we can catch them. After hesitating for a while, Will still came over and suggested to Kinzu. Do you want to bring a boat over? Kinzu was a little hesitant. Would it be too troublesome? Seeing this, Will's eyes turned and smiled and said, "Boss, it's okay not to bring a boat over. There is another way to catch them." "Oh?" Kinzu became interested and hurriedly said, "Tell me quickly, how should we catch them?" "Boss, wait a moment, I'll go get some tools." Will didn't answer in a hurry, but rode the four-wheel motorcycle beside him and ran back in a flash. Hey, Kinzu opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything. "I just asked you to catch a fish, why run away? Do you believe I will deduct your salary?" Just when Kinzu thought that all was deserting, with a roar, the four-wheel motorcycle stopped beside Kinzu again. "Hey, boss, look, what is this?" Will got off the motorcycle, raised two bows and arrows and gestured to Kinzu. "What is this?" "Shooting fish?" Kinzu seemed to understand something. Speaking of shooting fish, he had heard of this activity when he was in China. Of course, he only saw it on the internet. There were not enough fish to eat in China, but there was no place for you to shoot fish. Shooting fish mainly means shooting Asian carp. It is a fishing method that has only become popular in North America in recent years. The most fundamental purpose is to eliminate the Asian carp in the lake as much as possible. Why? Because they are too greedy. Asian carp eat everything, and can consume aquatic plants and plankton equivalent to 40% of their body weight every day. In this case, the already rampant Asian carp competed with the original fish for food and space, and almost caused the freshwater biological ecosystem in North America to collapse. So in order to protect native fish species, people had to find a way to eliminate Asian carp, and the activity of shooting fish was born from then on. Because these Asian carp are easily frightened, as long as you drive a boat into their habitat and make a sound, they will jump out of the water, and then you can use a bow and arrow to hunt them. However, the best time to shoot fish is in the spring when the flowers are blooming, when the fish are more active. When Kinzu came here, the weather was already a little cold, so it was not suitable to play this. "Yes, boss, this is the most convenient thing now." Will shrugged. But now Kinzu was about to say that it was winter now, how could he shoot fish? However, he turned his head and looked at the 40 pumps that were constantly running, and he understood everything. Such a big noise, let alone not hibernating yet, even if it was hibernating, it could wake it up. Kinzu took the bow and arrow from Will and looked through it, but he didn't understand anything. For a rookie like him who had never played with a bow and arrow, he only knew about compound bows and pulley bows. As for the difference, I'm sorry, go to Bedu, he doesn't know. "Boss, this is a compound bow, use it like this." Will saw that Kinzu didn't react when he held the bow, so he stepped forward to demonstrate. The use of bows and arrows is difficult, but it is also simple. Although it is difficult to shoot through the willows at 100 steps, it is still easy to learn if you just want to use it. So, Will just demonstrated it, and Kinzu understood the basic usage. Seeing that Kinzu could draw the bow in a proper manner, Will smiled and gave him a thumbs up, and then took him to the river. Because the pump kept stirring, the river water became a little turbid, and some big and small fish that sneaked over, thinking that there was something good, felt a little uncomfortable. In order to avoid lack of oxygen or being sucked by the mysterious suction, these big and small fish had to jump hard. Sure, the sound of breaking through the air suddenly sounded, and a sharp arrow with unparalleled speed directly pierced the head of a big black carp. Beautiful. Kinzu applauded beside him, with a look of admiration on his face. "Ha ha, boss, you can do it too, it's very simple." Will pulled the rope on the feather arrow back and encouraged Kinzu beside him with a smile. "Okay, watch me." Kinzu nodded, and did not refuse. He raised the bow and arrow confidently and came to the river. It felt very simple when watching from the side, but when I started to do it myself, I found that it was not what I thought at all. Because the time for the fish to jump out of the water is too short, before your eyes can adapt, it falls back into the water. So, when a big head carp jumped out of the water, Kinzu let go after aiming for a long time. Sure, the arrow missed the target as expected, and the silver carp had already fallen back into the water. Touching his nose awkwardly, Kinzu coughed twice and said with a wry smile, "Well, it was just a mistake, purely a mistake." Seeing this, Will smiled and walked forward, raised his bow and arrow and gestured. "Boss, this is not the way to shoot fish. You can't aim, just rely on your feeling. When you find a fish jumping up, let go immediately." As he spoke, Will loosened his hand, and a sharp arrow with a slight sound of breaking through the air went straight into the water. Also, boss, pay attention to the angle, slightly lower, because these fish will jump out of the water as quickly as possible. In this way, after your arrow is shot, even if you don't aim, it is often easy to hit the fallen fish in the end. holding a big silver carp of 50 to 60 centimeters in his hand, Will gestured with a smile. Qinzu looked at the silver carp, and felt so happy in his heart. He asked you to hide, but it finally came up. Well, I'll use you to sacrifice to my stomach tonight. Qinzu raised his compound bow and aimed again. Recalling Will's words, he didn't aim, but just relied on his feeling. When he found a fish jumping up, he immediately let go. Swish. Another miss. Qinzu was not discouraged. He pulled back the arrow and continued. He circled around the river with the bow and arrow. Seeing the splash of water over there, Qinzu shot another arrow. God will not let down those who work hard, or in other words, a blind bat meets a dead mouse. Anyway, Qinzu successfully hit the target with this arrow. When a crucian carp more than 30 centimeters long was dragged ashore, Shirley, who was watching nearby, blushed with excitement. Wow, what a big fish, Uncle, I knew you were the best. Ahem, of course, Uncle is the best. Facing the little girl's admiring eyes, Qinzu turned his head to the side a little stiffly. No one knows that he is feeling very proud now, because I was clearly aiming at a fish next to it. Thanks to 10-year-old Chong for the reward of 500 starting coins, and thanks to Zoomlan for the reward and support. Chapter 604 Let's catch fish. After all, shooting fish is just an entertainment activity. Although Qinzu had a lot of fun, he only shot more than 20 fish in a day. Well, Qinzu would not admit it, because he had no talent for archery, so he usually shot 2 or 3 out of 10 arrows. Just look at Will, he has caught more than 60 fish in the same time. But none of this is important. The important thing is that the water is dry. Yes, by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the water in the river had finally reached the bottom, and it was estimated that it would not exceed half the height of the calf. After sending Ryan, who came to join in the fun, to return the pump, Qinzu and the fisherman who came over went into the water with great interest to catch fish. Not to mention, after this hurricane, there are really quite a few fish that want to sneak in to gild themselves. Even though 70 or 80 fish have been caught, the riverbed is still densely packed with fish. This also proves one thing from another perspective. The United States is really flooded with Asian carp. You know, this place is not part of the mainstream river of the Great Lakes, but just a branch extending from the Mississippi River. Shaking his head, Qinzu put aside the random thoughts in his mind, and with the help of Dale, he successfully went down to the bottom of the river. Stepping on the hard bluestone slabs, Qinzu rolled up his sleeves, held a scoop net, and began his day of fishing. There is a saying that goes, nothing will go smoothly. Although these fish are already lambs to be slaughtered, the counterattack at the moment of death is not something that ordinary people can bear. When Qinzu was full of expectations and covered a more than 1 meter long silver carp with the scoop net, he tasted the taste of a fatal blow. The characteristics of silver carp are big, with a big head, a wide mouth, slightly upturned lips, and large gill holes. Similarly, it is very strong. When the tail came over, Qinzu felt that he could hardly hold the scoop net in his hand. Hurry, Simon, there's a big guy here. Qinzu grabbed the scoop net with difficulty and shouted to Simon beside him. Okay, boss, hold on. Simon threw down what he was holding and rushed over. When the two of them worked together, with the help of Dale and the other girls, they got the 1 meter long big guy ashore, and it was no longer in its original state. Damn it, if I had known earlier, I would have bought a few work clothes to keep at home. Looking at his Gucci casual clothes, Qinzu felt like crying without tears. He finally understood how much it cost to pretend to be cool. It was busy until the evening, especially with the help of Lin Yu's workers. Qinzu and his team finally cleaned up the river. If Qinzu was happy and tired today, Lin Yu's workers were envious and jealous. Looking at the fat and outrageous grass carps, the workers almost drooled. My goodness, how come this big head carp has grown so big? The young man who was among the workers last time, regardless of the mud on his body, sighed at today's catch. Yeah, I don't know what they eat. A middle-aged man, with a cigarette in his mouth, looked thoughtful, and suddenly said to the young man next to him, why don't you go and ask? If there is a secret recipe, we can also make a fortune by raising fish at home. The young man was a little tempted when he heard it, but when he looked at the young man who was surrounded by several big horses and wiping the stains on his face, he backed off a little. Sighing, the young man lowered his head and secretly wiped the stains on his body, sighing in his heart, we are all the same, why is the treatment so different? Lin Yu looked at Qinzu who was surrounded by several big guys, and felt a little uncomfortable. She stepped forward and joked, Clean, how old are you? Are you still playing in the mud? Ah. What are you doing? Halfway through her words, Lin Yu suddenly exclaimed, covered her plumpness and stepped back, with a blush on her face. Eva threw away the tissue she had wiped with her hands, and couldn't help laughing. Lin, you don't know Qin's character yet. When has he ever suffered a loss? Qin Zhu shook his hands in front of him and said proudly, that's right, don't you see where this is? Dare to laugh at me here. Lin Yu looked at the 5 conspicuous finger marks on her chest, and then looked at the face of shame and anger on the proud guy in front of her. Damn Qin Zhu, he actually dared to do this to herself. Did he really think he was an open-minded foreigner? Although she wanted to cut him into pieces, considering her small arms and legs, she had to suppress this impulse. Qin Zhu ignored Lin Yu's thoughts and flirted with the uniformed glasses girl. Then he began to worry about the large number of lively Asian carps in front of him. Is it a welfare to give it to these foreigners? I guess they won't be liked, but will be scolded to death by these guys. No foreigners eat this kind of fish, because they don't know how to remove the fishy smell and can't cook Asian carp well. So for them, Asian carp not only has many bones, but also smells fishy and can only be fed to dogs. If they don't give it away, how long will they eat it by themselves? Moreover, the fish that were shot were basically pierced by an arrow, dead, and it is impossible to release them. Oh, what a happy trouble. Qin Zhu raised his right hand and subconsciously wanted to scratch his head. However, he reacted when he raised it halfway, and put his hand back in the face of Lin Yu's regretful expression. Seeing Lin Yu's regretful look, Qin Zhu made a grasping gesture with his right hand and winked at her proudly. Lin Yu's face, which had returned to normal, suddenly turned bright red again. She stamped her feet and turned toward back. Hey, Lin Yu, wait a minute. Qin Zhu suddenly called her. What else do you want to do? Lin Yu turned around with a face full of shame and anger. Is this guy going to stop? Qin Zhu laughed awkwardly and said helplessly, well, Lin Yu, see if there are any people who like to eat fish, and share these with everyone. Lin Yu was stunned and was about to say who wants your broken fish. However, when she accidentally glanced at the workers on the opposite side who were looking at this place with envy, she swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue. Okay, then you share some and I'll give them to them. Perhaps she felt a little embarrassed. Lin Yu's expression was a little awkward. Qin Zhu didn't continue to tease her when he saw this. Even rabbits will bite when they are anxious. If he really teases her, it will not be fun. He called Will and Simon over and didn't hold back. Estimating the number of people, he picked out more than 100 pieces of fish, big and small, and put them into sacks and sent them to her. Chapter 605. Pickled salted fish. Knowing that these fish were given to them, the workers were so happy. Wild fish are not so easy to eat in China. Except for those large reservoirs, most places now mainly farm fish. After all, wild fish usually grow slowly, and most people don't have the time to get them. More than 100 fish, 20 or so workers, 5 or 6 per person, enough to eat for several days. Seeing the workers' high spirits, Lin Yu felt relieved and his resentment towards Qin Zhu was also reduced. Although Qin Zhu had distributed more than 100 fish, there were still many left. After a rough count, there were more than 100 left. Hey, Lin Yu, there are still so many, do you want to take some more? Forget it, this is almost enough, they can't eat more. Lin Yu shook her head. She was not being polite, but the workers really couldn't take any more. Qin Zhu scratched his head when he saw this, but they didn't want it, so he couldn't throw it away. Just looking at the dirty Gucci on his body, Qin Zhu glanced. Simon, these are left to you. Simon, who was joking with Will, was a little dumbfounded when he heard it. He had never handled freshwater fish. Seeing Qin Zhu turning around and leaving, he hurriedly asked, Boss, how do you deal with these? Qin Zhu stopped when he heard it. Just as he was about to say something, Eva next to him smiled and said, Qin, you go change first, just leave this to me. Qin Zhu pouted and looked at Simon with disdain. See, you can't even do this. After saying that, without waiting for Simon to refute, he took the little girl and several female bodyguards and walked towards the villa, leaving Simon alone in tears. I don't eat Asian carp, is it wrong that I don't know how to deal with it? Seeing this, Will came over and patted Simon on the shoulder, saying earnestly, see, the boss said that you can't even do this, so you have to learn to kill fish. Simon looked at Will with resentful eyes. You were doing this on purpose. What kind of fisherman would I be if I can't kill fish? But Eva didn't care about that. Seeing Qin Zhu leave, she waved her hand. Come on, I can't handle these guys by myself. Will and the others looked at each other. Boss lady, we're all so covered in mud. We also want to go back to Washington. Back to the villa. Kinzu first went into the bathroom and washed thoroughly. After washing for more than half an hour, he felt that the fishy smell on his body was less. After changing clothes and walking out of the villa, Kinzu always felt that something was missing. After walking around for a long time, Kinzu slapped his thigh suddenly. Where is my plane? Dale, have you seen my Black Hawk? Kinzu quickly called Dale next to him and asked. Oh, boss, I forgot to tell you that I parked the Black Hawk in the hangar. Dale looked calm and composed. Kinzu breathed a sigh of relief when he heard it. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly reacted. Hangar? Where did we get the hangar? It was Dale's turn to be dumbfounded. Don't you know where your own hangar is? Kinzu scratched his head, and somewhat awkwardly avoided Dale's gaze that looked at him like a fool, and asked. Tell me quickly, where is the hangar? It's on the roof of the second floor. Dale led the way in front, and the two ended upstairs. Going up to the second floor, along the garden, they came to a small door next to it. Pushing the small door open, Kinzu saw an exquisite small staircase. There is actually a staircase here. Kinzu looked at everything in front of him with some surprise. He had lived in the villa for more than 2 months, and he really didn't know there was a staircase here. Boss, you don't know? Dale seemed very surprised. Kinzu touched his nose and said a little embarrassedly, well, maybe I didn't pay attention when he introduced it. Kinzu guessed correctly. When old John introduced it, he also mentioned that there was a helicopter pad here. It was just that Kinzu was too excited at the time and didn't pay attention. It's easy to imagine that when designing such a luxurious villa, how could they not consider the problem of helicopter parking? After going up the stairs, Kinzu finally found his Black Hawk, which was parked in a huge room. It's not really a room, it can only be regarded as a huge glass cover on a roof. Because Kinzu was below, he could actually see the blue sky outside. As if thinking that Kinzu really didn't know this place, Dale simply explained it to the side. Boss, the glass here is all special bulletproof glass, even large caliber bullets can't penetrate it. As he said, Dale pressed it next to him, and saw that the glass cover above his head suddenly moved slowly. Slowly, the glass cover slowly opened from the middle, revealing the blue sky outside. It can be like this. Kinzu was shocked. It turned out that the life of the rich was so luxurious. Kinzu was still a little confused until he went downstairs. He was really a failure. He didn't even know that there was a hangar in the villa. Not long after, Eva led Will and Simon back, carrying several baskets of cleaned fish. Boss, what should we do at these now? She gestured to Will and Simon to put the fish under the porch, wiped her hands and walked in to ask. Kinzu came back to his senses, walked out of the villa, and looked at the big fish that were not clean. He felt a little greedy. But he definitely couldn't eat so many at once. Thinking of his mother trying salted fish every New Year, he said, how about this, sprinkle all these fish with salt and marinate them. Sprinkle salt on all of them. Eva was a little dazed when she heard this. She couldn't eat all of them. Kinzu nodded, well, sprinkle all of them with salt and marinate them, and then air dry them. Seeing that Eva was still a little confused, Kinzu explained in detail how to marinate salted fish. After hearing this, Eva swallowed hard and asked with some stammering, but, can we still eat this kind of fish? Why not? Kinzu asked back with some curiosity, this, with so much salt, won't you get sick if you eat it? Eva asked weakly. Kinzu touched his chin and smiled and said, then just eat less. The salted fish is pickled, stir-fried with chili peppers, the taste is so good. As he spoke, Kinzu's saliva was about to flow out. Although many people say that eating too much salted fish is not good, in rural China, almost every household will pickle some during the new year. In the past, people chose to pickle it because it was easy to preserve. But now almost every family has a refrigerator, and many people still choose to pickle salted fish in this way. Why? It is because the fish pickled in this way tastes different. Seeing that Kinzu said so, Eva didn't say anything. However, after looking in the kitchen, she walked out again helplessly. Thank you for the reward and support from Joshua Shaba. Chapter 606. Meet an acquaintance again. Boss, if you do this, we won't have enough salt at home. Eva seemed helpless. The salt at home couldn't stand Kinzu's bossing. Oh? Kinzu nodded, stood up and said, that's not a problem. I'll go buy some. Hearing this, Dale next to him stood up and said, boss, how much do you need? I'll go buy it. Qin Zhu waved his hand and said, "You can prepare it at home. It's such a short distance. I'll go." After saying that, he didn't wait for the two girls to react, picked up the key and ran out. What a joke, he just changed his clothes and didn't want to get fishy all over his body. Eva shrugged helplessly, looked at Dale, and had to roll up her sleeves to do the preparations first. Because he was alone, Qin Zhu didn't drive the sturdy Knight the 15th, but chose the blue McLaren. Compared with armored vehicles, he likes this kind of cool sports car more. There's no other reason, the effect of pretending is obvious. For example, armored vehicles, in the eyes of those who know the business, they can naturally see the value, but if people who don't know cars see it, isn't it just a small Jeep? Although he drove a relatively cool supercar, Qin Zhu didn't wander around outside for long, but went straight to the Chinese supermarket. So many fish can't all be pickled, after all, you have to eat something fresh. And eating fish, of course, is inseparable from the various seasonings. Of course, if the pot base is more convenient than the seasoning, it would be even more perfect. For example, pickled fish, such as spicy fish pot base, these things are convenient and delicious to eat, and can be called the first choice for foodies. Well, for example, Qin Zhu is lazy and loves to eat. After parking the car at the door, Qin Zhu was about to enter the supermarket, but heard a surprised voice behind him. "Hey, Shaolin, you're here to buy again." Qin Zhu turned around and saw Dancing, whom he had just met 2 days ago, walking towards this side with a basket. He smiled and greeted her. "Oh, it's Dancing, what a coincidence." Dancing glanced at the Maybach next to her, her eyes narrowed into a line, and the kind smile on her face became even brighter. "Yes, it's really a coincidence. I came here to buy some vegetables to cook dinner." "What are you doing?" Qin Zhu walked in with Dancing, smiling and said, "I came to buy some salt. I got some grass carp and prepared to pickle it." "Oh? Grass carp? How big is it?" Dancing immediately became interested. Qin Zhu gestured and said, "There are big and small ones. The big ones are 1 meter long, and the small ones are 30 or 40 centimeters long." "What?" Dancing is interested. Dancing nodded repeatedly, looked around, pulled Qin Zhu aside, and whispered, "Shaolin, look, do you have too many fish over there? Give me some and I'll give you money." Qin Zhu looked at the middle-aged woman in a strange way. "Are you kidding? Here, there are still people who spend money to buy Asian carp." In fact, Qin Zhu misunderstood this point. Although Asian carp are rampant in the United States, Americans don't eat them. No one eats them, which means no one sells them. There are indeed Asian carp in the river, but you still need someone to fish for them. And they don't allow the fish they catch to be sold. You can give them to others, but if you charge money, haha. Besides, not everyone has time. Even if they have time, not everyone can fish, and you need a fishing license to fish. In short, there is still a market for Asian carp here. After listening to Dancing's complaints and explanations, Qin Zhu finally understood that there were still people who couldn't eat Asian carp. "Don't they sell it here?" Qin Zhu pointed to the supermarket. "Logically, there should be Asian carp for sale here, right?" Dancing shrugged and said helplessly, "They don't have a business license either. This thing is very strictly controlled." Nodding suddenly, Qin Zhu smiled and said, "Well, Dancing, if you like to eat it, I'll bring you a few later." Seeing that she wanted to say something, Qin Zhu waved his hand and teased, "Forget about the money. I'm also afraid of being caught." "How can I do this?" Dancing rubbed her hands a little embarrassedly. She was really embarrassed to take it like this. "It's okay. Anyway, there are a lot of them. I cleaned the river today and got more than 100. It's not because I can't eat them all, so I came here to buy some salt to pickle them." When Qin Zhu finished picking things, Dancing just came out after paying the bill. At the door, Dancing looked at the sky and said with a smile, "How about this, Shaolin, you wait here for me, I will drive with you, okay?" Qin Zhu was happy to hear this. This really suited his taste. He didn't want to drive over later. "Okay, Dancing, then I'll wait for you in front." After waiting at the intersection in front for about 10 minutes, just when Qin Zhu was a little bored, a silver-white Audi of unknown model drove up from behind him. Dancing rolled down the window and said a little embarrassedly, "Shaolin, I've kept you waiting for a long time, let's go now." Qin Zhu nodded, didn't say anything, started the McLaren and led the way. But in his heart, he was muttering, "It seems that Dancing's family is not simple, that Audi is not a low-end product at first glance." Although he was a little curious, Kinzu didn't think much about it, drove the McLaren all the way, and rushed back to the ranch in more than 10 minutes. As soon as he stopped the car at the door of the villa, Wayne came to meet him and looked at the Audi following behind with some curiosity. "That's a friend of mine. You can take the things back first." Kinzu smiled and motioned her to relax her vigilance. He then walked back to meet her. "Shaolin, so you're the new owner of the Tycoon Manor?" "I really can't tell." Anson looked at Kinzu with shining eyes. To be honest, she really didn't see the shadow of a billionaire in Kinzu. Touching his nose, Kinzu didn't explain anything, but smiled and said, "It's nothing. It all depends on luck. Anson, come this way. You can pick a few." Nodding, Anson didn't move, but opened the back door and took out 2 cardboard boxes that were about the size of a suitcase. Kinzu was stunned when he saw this, but seeing that she was struggling, he hurried forward 2 steps and stretched out his hand to take it. After putting the cardboard box on the ground, Kinzu couldn't help but ask curiously when he heard some familiar noises inside. "Anson, what is this?" Anson opened the cardboard box, showing a smug smile, pointing at the things inside and said, "Last time I saw you looking for a live poultry market in Revere, I knew you definitely didn't raise chickens or ducks here. It happened that I raised some at home, so I brought a few for you. You can raise them first and see." Looking at the 4 chickens and 4 ducks with their feet tied in the cardboard box, Kinzu didn't know what to say for a while. There was joy, and some light touch. "Anyway, my heart was warm." "Thank you, Wat." Liu expressed envy and jealousy, "because I have been working for 2 days. Chapter 607. It's snowing. The north wind was howling and snowflakes were flying. Kinzu woke up from his sleep early in the morning, grumbling. It's really cold. Has the temperature dropped?" Rubbing his eyes, Kinzu put on a thick robe, leaned against the head of the bed, turned on his mobile phone, and checked the recent weather in Boston. Is it snowing today?" Kinzu looked at his phone and uttered a light exclamation. He lifted the quilt, stepped barefoot on the cashmere carpet, and came to the window. He opened the thick curtains, and a dazzling white light suddenly appeared in his eyes, which made him unable to open his eyes. "It's really snowing. This is too fast." It turned white overnight. Looking at the world covered in silver outside, Kinzu was a little dazed. Before he woke up, the door creaked and was twisted open from the outside. "Uncle, get up quickly, it's snowing outside." As the voice fell, Shirley's small figure ran in from outside. Perhaps because it snowed today, the little girl was wearing a pink down jacket, white down pants, and a pair of white furry snow boots. Maybe because she had just come back from outside, the little girl's face was still red. When she saw Kinzu standing by the window, she rushed over. "Little girl, why did you get up so early?" Kinzu picked up Shirley and asked with a smile, looking at the little girl who was dressed a little heavy today. "Because it snowed." The little girl looked as if it was natural, as if it snowed, so she should get up early. It snowed, shouldn't I sleep at home?" Kinzu pretended to be very confused and deliberately teased the little girl. Sure enough, when she heard Kinzu say that, the little girl became a little anxious, and grabbed Kinzu's neck with both hands and shook it hard. "Uncle, it's snowing outside, it's so beautiful, let's go out and see the snow, okay?" Kinzu felt his bones softened by the little girl's coquettishness, and hurriedly agreed. "Okay, stop shaking, Uncle is about to fall apart, and then there will be no one to accompany you to see the snow." Hearing Kinzu's agreement, the little girl immediately became happy, struggled to climb down, and ran out while saying, "Uncle, change your clothes quickly, I'll wait for you outside." Looking at the little girl's back, Kinzu smiled and shook his head, opened the closet, picked out a set of clothes to change, and then walked into the bathroom. When Kinzu finished washing and went downstairs, there was no one in the living room except her and Xiaohe, who were lazily lying on the carpet. After walking around the restaurant, Kinzu took 2 sandwiches and stuffed them into his mouth while walking out of the villa. Cluck. Cluck. Just as he walked to the door, before he could see the beautiful scenery in front of him, Kinzu heard a familiar and somewhat intimate rooster crowing. Following the sound, he saw the 2 big roosters that Anson gave him yesterday, standing under the pergola, with their heads held high, looking very heroic and calling out at the top of their lungs. Well, if you don't look at the rope tied to their legs, they look really majestic. Touching his nose, Kinzu thought to himself, "Why are you showing off? If I didn't want to keep you for breeding, you would have been on my table last night." Thinking of this, Kinzu couldn't help swallowing his saliva, and the sandwich in his hand, which was originally very fragrant, became a little tasteless. I don't know where Aunt got these chickens and ducks from, but they are all authentic local chickens in China. Not only that, these local chickens are the specialty of a county not far from him, Gushy local chickens. Gushy chickens are yellow chickens, with the characteristics of high egg production, large eggs with thick shells, and stable genetic performance. They are both egg-laying and meat-laying chickens. Although they are distributed throughout the region, Gushy has the largest number. The Gushy chicken has a triangular body, plump feathers, a single upright comb, 6 comb teeth, a forked rear edge of the comb, bright red comb, ridges, and earlobes, large eyes, and a short green-yellow taste. The rooster's feathers are dark red and yellow, and the sickle feathers are mostly black, with a rich bronze luster. The hen's feathers are mainly efted and yellow, with very few white and black. Qinzu's family has raised this kind of chicken since he was a child, and he grew up eating them. But after going to school in another province, he rarely eats authentic ones, and they are all hybrid fast-growing broilers. Therefore, when Qinzu saw these guys yesterday, he almost couldn't help but want to have a chicken stew with mushrooms. However, considering that there will be more chickens to eat in the future, Qinzu still suppressed his desire and tied them all under the porch outside the door. "Uncle, you're up, come quickly." Shirley's crisp little voice interrupted Qinzu's meditation. Looking up, not far ahead, the little girl, who had put on a pair of bear-shaped leather gloves at some point, was squatting on the side with great interest, watching Eva and the others busy shoveling snow. At this moment, the snowflakes in the sky had become a little sparse. However, after a night of invasion, a thick layer of snow had accumulated at the door of the villa. Qinzu stepped on it tentatively, and his whole foot immediately sank into it, and the snow directly covered his instep. "Clean, you're up." Eva took off her hat and shook off the snow on it, standing aside with a shovel, smiling and greeting Qinzu. Qinzu nodded, looking at the vast white pasture, and sighed. This year's first snow came a little suddenly. Eva nodded in agreement. This snow came a little suddenly. "Isn't it still snowing? Why are you shoveling snow now?" Seeing Dale and Erica and the others still clearing the snow on the road, Qinzu couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. It was really awkward for him to sleep at home while letting the women busy outside. Eva stopped what she was doing, looked at the embarrassed Qinzu, and said with a smile, "Clean, these snows can't be left for too long. If they freeze, it will be difficult to clean up. Anyway, there's nothing to do now, just clean it up casually." Qinzu nodded, finished the sandwich in his hand in a few bites, stepped forward to take the shovel in her hand, and said with a smile, "Come on, let me try, I haven't shoveled snow since I was a child." Eva didn't refuse, handed him the shovel, clapped her hands with a smile and stepped aside. At this time, the main road in front of the door had been almost cleared. Dale and the others also packed up their things and came to the side, watching Qinzu busying around with a smile. Uncle, are you going to build a snowman? Can you take me with you?" When the little girl saw Qinzu holding a shovel, she hurried over and asked happily. Chapter 608. Making a snowman. Build a snowman? There's not enough snow. Qinzu shoveled it. Although there was a lot of snow, it still felt a little thin. Eva nodded in agreement, smiled and hugged the little girl beside her, and said, "There is too little snow now, let it accumulate, and we will build a snowman tomorrow." Shirley heard this and said oh in disappointment, and the whole person looked a little listless. "Okay, when the snow is a little heavier, Uncle will take you to build a snowman, okay?" Qinzu put down the shovel, smiled and touched the little girl's head, and comforted her softly. After hearing what Qinzu said, the little girl became a little happy and agreed sweetly. "Clean, it seems that you are still more charming." Eva shrugged helplessly. Why do different people say the same words and have different effects? Maybe God doesn't want the little girl to build a snowman. It hasn't been a while, and the snowflakes in the sky stopped. Has the snow stopped? When the little girl heard the news from Ween, her mouth pursed and she almost cried. "Be good, Shirley, don't cry, let's go out and take a look." Qinzu hurriedly picked up the little girl and walked towards the door of the villa. The snow really stopped. Not only that, the sky, which was a little gloomy, also became clear again. Standing under the porch, Qinzu looked at the snow-covered pasture not far away, and felt relieved. I believe that anyone who has seen this beautiful scenery will feel peaceful in their hearts. However, when Qinzu saw the little girl next to him, the peace in his heart could not be maintained. "Don't worry, little girl, let's go make a snowman, okay?" Shirley pursed her lips. "Uncle, didn't you say there was not enough snow?" "It's okay, let's ask your Aunt Eva to do it aside." As he said that, Qinzu called Eva next to him and whispered a few words. There was no way. Looking at the little girl's look, if she was not given something to do, she would probably cry soon. After finding a pair of gloves to put on, Kinzu took a small shovel, led Shirley and two not-so-behaved huskies to the snow-covered lawn on the side of the villa. Go, you two go play over there. With a wave of his hand, Kinzu pushed away the two mischievous little huskies and began to shovel the snow on the side. It takes a lot of snow to build a snowman. Although there is a lot of snow around, when Kinzu concentrated, he found that even the big belly of the snowman could not be piled up. Uncle, there is not enough snow? The little girl squatted on the side, watching calmly, holding two anxious little huskies in her arms. It's okay, look, isn't it coming over there? Kinzu put away the small shovel and pointed to a place not far away. Shirley heard this and turned around with some curiosity, and saw Aunt Eva and Aunt Dale, who were carrying a basket of snow and walking over with a smile on their faces. Wow, there is so much snow. Now we can make a snowman. The little girl jumped up in surprise and hurried over to greet her, saying sweetly, Aunt Eva, you are so nice. Eva put down the basket in her hand, smiled and pinched the little girl's chubby face, and asked, Is Aunt Dale not okay? Okay, Aunt Dale is also okay. Shirley shook her head quickly, and then smiled sweetly at Dale next to her. Kinzu ignored the three women around him, took the basket, and poured out the snow directly. In an instant, a pile of dazzling white snow appeared on the open space. With the snow, Kinzu's speed increased. While the three women were still discussing something, Kinzu's masterpiece was already out. Making a snowman sounds simple, and Kinzu thought so at first. The only thing he was worried about was that there was not enough snow. But now there is enough snow and the snowman has been made, but Kinzu is a little scratching his head. Why does the snowman he made look so awkward? Uncle, Shirley called out weakly. What's wrong? Kinzu asked casually, touching his chin without looking back. What is this? The little girl pointed to the pair of snow in front of her, and her voice became even weaker. Kinzu looked back at Shirley in surprise, and replied as a matter of course, This is a snowman. After that, he touched his nose with a guilty conscience and asked, Doesn't it look like it? Does it look like it? Shirley muttered softly. It should look like it, right? Eva and Dale also looked at each other. The two little guys didn't say anything, looked around, and ran up directly, striding their legs, and began to shush. You two bastards, lunch is cancelled today. Kinzu roared in anger. Well, Kinzu did what he said. At noon, the two mischievous little guys squatted pitifully under the porch, watching their friends feasting there. At this moment, Darta's heart was filled with something called regret. Why couldn't he bear it? It didn't mean to do that. It was just in a hurry to pee. And the only person around was the snowman to lean on. Can you blame it? But it's useless to say anything now. The owner is furious. Lunch is gone, and there's no guarantee of dinner. Thinking of this, Daha couldn't sit still anymore and lay down weakly. Unexpectedly, as soon as he lay down, there was a small piece of beef with blood in front of him. He raised his little head in surprise, and Dahu's big face, which looked shabby, came into his eyes. Seeing Daha looking up at him, Dahu turned his head and peeped into the house, then stretched out his little paw and pushed the meat in front of Daha, and he ran back to the porch. Looking at the piece of beef with blood in front of him, Dahu's handsome face was a little distorted. He swallowed hard and pushed the meat to Xiaohe next to him. Xiaohe's little eyes were actually staring at the piece of beef, and he was very greedy. But when its brother pushed the meat to it, it felt embarrassed and quickly pushed the meat back. Daha was a little anxious. This was not a game. If it was discovered, it would be gone. Just as he was about to push it again, he saw Xiao sneaking over with a piece of beef in his mouth. Putting the beef in front of Xiaohe, Xiao rubbed the two little huskies affectionately, and then slid back. The two huskies looked at each other, and without delay, they picked up the beef, found a corner and quickly devoured it. Before they finished eating the beef, there was a sudden noise in front of them, and two big red apples suddenly appeared in front of them. Looking up, the corners of the little guy's mouth suddenly cracked. He was worthy of being his little friend. He shared the good and the bad. Chapter 609 Raw Materials List. Kinzu didn't care about the love between the little guys. He didn't plan to starve them for long. He just wanted to scare them. Who made these two guys grow bolder and bolder even though they didn't grow much? After lunch, the little girl yelled that she wanted to build a snowman. Kinzu was too embarrassed to follow her this time. Just then, Chenmu called, and Kinzu took the opportunity to send them out to play. Kinzu picked up the phone and walked upstairs while talking. Arriving on the second floor, Kinzu sat down in the pavilion and adjusted the recline to a comfortable position. He was a little surprised and said, "What did you say?" "The supply of raw materials is tight." Chenmu laughed twice on the phone. "Boss, it's not that the supply is tight, but there is not much stock left, and the recent business is very good, plus it's going to winter again. I want to ask you what you were going to do." Kinzu rolled his eyes speechlessly. "Brother Chen, you are the restaurant manager, you ask me what you were going to do." Chenmu coughed twice and smiled awkwardly. "Well, it's because the things in your manor are good. If you don't have them, I will go to other places to buy them." Hearing Chenmu say that he was going to buy them, Kinzu was a little reluctant. After all, it was his own restaurant. If he could use his own, of course it would be better to have his own. After struggling for a while, Kinzu sighed helplessly. "Forget it, tell me what you are missing, I will see if I can get it together." "Okay, but it's not convenient to talk on the phone, then I will send you a fax later." Chenmu nodded and agreed happily. After hanging up the phone, Kinzu touched his chin and had a bad feeling in his heart. Are so many things missing? Do we still need to send a fax? Although he was prepared, when Kinzu saw the A4 paper filled with small words, he still felt like vomiting blood. On such a nice snowy day, how nice it would be to make a cup of warm tea and lie at home to warm up. Isn't this asking for trouble? Thinking of this, Kinzu envied the workers. As soon as it snowed today, Linyu gave them a holiday. I guess these guys are now gathered together, drinking warm fish soup and imagining life. As for playing cards, well, before they came, they had been warned by Linyu that if they didn't want to be caught, it would be better not to play these. Here, even if you bet a little bit of $1 or $2, if you are caught by the police, you will be in trouble. Shaking his head with a smile, Kinzu threw these messy thoughts behind his mind and began to look at the fact information seriously. Lobster is indispensable, and it must be big. King crab? Well, this is understandable. After all, a high-end restaurant, although not specialized in seafood, must have it. But why do you want a bologna? Is it popular in the United States to eat a bologna? Kinzu scratched his head in confusion. Then he looked down and saw that tuna was also indispensable. Well, Kinzu nodded with satisfaction. This guy didn't ask for bluefin tuna directly, so he was sensible. If this guy asked him for bluefin tuna directly, Kinzu would definitely drive straight to Boston and slap this list of raw materials in his face. However, when he continued to read, Kinzu really had the urge to do so. Blue marlin, toadfish, premium turbot, queen parrotfish, stonefish. These guys are not easy to find. And this kind of high-end restaurant definitely doesn't need those ordinary little guys, which makes Kinzu even more confused. Forget it, give this to Will, let him worry about it. Kinzu chuckled twice, got up and went downstairs, put on his boots and walked out. When he arrived at the door of the villa, two little huskies immediately greeted him. It was okay not to have food in the morning, but he couldn't be hungry at night. Seeing this, Kinzu laughed and scolded twice, turned around and went back to the house to get some food and threw it to the little guys. When he arrived at the dog, Kinzu found the busy Will and handed him the information to look at. "Boss, this is a bit difficult." Will frowned and looked through the information. He knew that these must be what the restaurant needed, but there was really no way now. "You just look at it first, and if it doesn't work, I'll think of a way then." Kinzu shrugged helplessly. If it really didn't work, he could only use his trump card. Will nodded and said with a smile, "That's fine. I'll go out to sea in the next 2 days to see if there will be any harvest." "Okay, let's do this first, you can do it." Kinzu stood up and patted Will's shoulder vigorously, showing a look of "I'm very optimistic about you," which made Will, an honest man, feel a little pressured. After saying goodbye to Will, Kinzu wrapped his coat around him and strolled casually in the snow-covered pasture, thinking about what to do next. The heavy snow came a little suddenly, and he looked at the weather forecast for the next day. If nothing unexpected happens, it will still snow. This means that the long winter has officially arrived. The winter in Boston is much longer than other places. It can be said that winter has begun in November, and then the temperature will not rise much in March or April of the following year. Old John finally finished harvesting the small pasture before the heavy snow fell. There are only about 5,000 tons of fresh grass in the pasture of hundreds of acres, which means that the yield per acre is less than 10 tons. As for the yield, I have to say it is bad, very bad, and extremely bad. You should know that the normal yield per acre of alfalfa is about 16 to 30 tons per acre, but now the yield per acre is less than 10 acres. He shook his head and smiled bigly. Fortunately, he did not expect to make money from these forage grasses, otherwise he would definitely lose all his money. 5,000 tons of fresh forage grass. The quality is not very good, only about 60,000 to 70,000 US dollars. Kinzu did not care too much and directly exchanged a batch of concentrated feed with Marchi, which happened to be used for dairy cows now. Thinking of dairy cows, Kinzu's steps could not help but pause. It can be said that it is lucky. Maybe because these guys are too small, there is no loss in a hurricane. Not only that, the frightened big guys who were pregnant also took the opportunity to add a few more little guys to the ranch. Lifting his legs, Kinzu changed direction and walked directly towards the dairy cow factory. Speaking of which, there is a little guy over there who has not been seen for a long time. In fact, Kinzu himself is a little ashamed. He really cares too little about the ranch. If it were another rancher who had a new breed of cattle, or a method to improve the genetics of cattle and sheep on his ranch, he would have to watch over them every day. But if I hadn't remembered it today, I would have probably forgotten about it, right? Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto al mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 610. The strong calf. Arriving at the entrance of the dairy factory, Kinzu happened to meet old John, who was walking out of it. He was surprised and said, "Didn't I say you were in the office to deal with things? Why are you out again?" Old John shook the two small mustaches at the corners of his mouth and said with a smile, "Boss, you just said that I can't hurt anymore, but you didn't say that I can't do anything else, right?" Kinzu was stunned, smiled bitterly and shook his head. I'm just worried about your health. You have worked hard for decades, and it's time to relax." Old John sat down on the steps in front of the door, took out a cigarette and handed it to him. Before Kinzu reached out to take it, the old guy seemed to react, took the cigarette back, and smiled embarrassedly. "Sorry, boss, I forgot you don't smoke." Kinzu's mouth twitched. "When did I say I didn't smoke?" He snatched the cigarette, and in old John's astonished eyes, Kinzu took his lighter, sat on the steps, and lit one for himself leisurely. "Oh, so you smoke, boss?" Old John shrugged his shoulders, showing a very surprised expression. "Of course." Kinzu took a deep breath, exhaled a slightly thin smoke ring, and said with a smile, "I used to smoke, but I've been busy here recently and forgot about it." Hearing this, old John glanced at Kinzu, who looked very calm, and wanted to complain deeply. "You're busy? How come I don't know? Since you came to the ranch, when have you been busy? If even you're busy, then don't we have to split ourselves in half?" Although he was very dissatisfied with this hands-off boss in his heart, he had to give face to the boss after all, so old John had to force a slightly stiff smile to cooperate with Kinzu. After sitting at the door for a while and finishing a cigarette, Kinzu casually put out the cigarette butt, patted his butt and stood up. "Let's go in and see our little guys first. We haven't seen them for a while, and I don't know how they are growing." Old John also stood up and put out his cigarette butt on the trash can next to him. Hearing this, he smiled and said, "Boss, don't worry. They are all very healthy now, and their hides are growing rapidly." When Kinzu saw the calf, he finally understood what old John meant by growing rapidly. Isn't it growing rapidly? The last time he saw it, the calf was only as tall as his thigh, but what about now? The calf in front of him, with a strong physique and snow-white fur, is almost as tall as him. If Kinzu didn't know the inside story, he would really suspect that some cowboy had done something bad and gave this guy hormones. "Look at this physique, boss, this guy is so strong." Old John patted the calf's back and said in an incredible tone, "If I hadn't seen it grow up with my own eyes, I really couldn't believe that this was a calf that was less than half a year old." Kinzu nodded in agreement. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't believe it. "What about other calves? Has this happened?" Old John shook his head with some regret. "No, there is only this one. I even observed it for a few days. They are just ordinary dairy cows." Although he had been mentally prepared that new cattle breeds could not be obtained so easily, when Kinzu really heard the news, he was still a little disappointed. Old John, who was following beside him, saw that his boss was a little depressed, and hurriedly comforted him. Boss, I suspect that this calf is the result of an accidental cross between a mother cow and another breed of cattle. Although it may be a new breed of cattle, the specific situation is still unclear, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Kinzu nodded in agreement, as if he felt that what old John said made sense. But he was smiling bitterly in his heart. Not sure? How could he not know the specific effect? After seeing several newly born calves, Kinzu and the others did not stay for long, and walked out of the dairy factory directly. Arriving at the door, Kinzu put on his gloves and said, "By the way, old John, once these calves are born, our ranch will not be able to consume the milk, right?" "Yes." Old John closed the door and said with a smile, "With the few people on our ranch, one cow is enough. In that case, contact the Byring Revere to sell the extra ones. This stuff can't be stored." After Kinzu finished speaking, he waved to old John and turned around and walked directly to the villa. Although the distance might be a bit far if he walked, who told him to be fine? Strolling all the way, Kinzu soon returned to the door of the villa, stomped the snow on his feet hard, and just as he was about to enter the house, he heard Shirley's cheerful laughter behind him. Out of curiosity, Kinzu simply didn't enter the villa, but turned around and walked to their side. Turning a corner, next to the snowman he had just built in the morning, there stood a much more beautiful snowman. Let's not talk about the snowman's figure, which is 100 times better than Kinzu's. Just talking about the way it's dressed, it's far better than Kinzu's bear snowman. "Uncle, look, isn't Aunt Eva's snowman prettier than yours?" Seeing Kinzu come in, the little girl ran up with her legs stomping. But the question she asked made Kinzu's mouth twitch unconsciously. "Ah, hectares, then, Shirley, what do you think is better than my uncle's?" "It's ugly, just like Bear's big face, not cool at all." Shirley scratched her head in confusion, turned around and looked up and down carefully. She was a little unconvinced, but she couldn't say what was not good looking, so she had to look at Eva on the side for help. "Okay, Clean, stop teasing the child, are you done with your work?" Eva smiled and hugged the little girl, whispered a few words in her ear, and then smiled and greeted Kinzu. Speaking of this, Kinzu didn't even have the heart to tease the little girl. He came to the side and leaned against the wall, and said a little depressed, "Don't mention it. Chenmu wants so many things. How can I get them all in a short time? There's nothing I can do about it." Eva smiled and comforted him, "Clean, you have to know that winter is coming. It's still a little better now. If the weather gets colder, the fishing boats will not dare to go out to sea." Sighing, Kinzu nodded, "I know that too, so I have asked for to go out to sea these days. As for other things, we can only do it ourselves." "We do it ourselves?" Eva looked over curiously and asked, "Clean, what things do we have to do ourselves?" Kinzu smiled and said nothing. Instead, he whistled loudly at the pair of little huskies busying around next to him. Chapter 611 Giant Black Truffle. Woof 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 woof. In the snow-covered pine forest, a few crisp dog barks suddenly broke the quiet environment. As the dog barks sounded, several figures followed the two little huskies, stepped on the creaking ground, and walked into the depths of the woods. "Clean, what are we going to do?" Eva asked Kinzu curiously, holding the shovel in her hand and poking the ground casually. Kinzu smiled when he heard it, but before he could answer, Shirley next to him couldn't wait to ask, "Uncle, are we going to dig truffles?" Kinzu looked at the little girl approvingly and nodded, "Yes, we're here to dig truffles today." "Really digging truffles?" Eva exclaimed. She had thought of this possibility just now, but she didn't dare to confirm it. Then, Eva asked with some doubts, "Are there still truffles here?" It's no wonder she was confused. She found so many here last time. Could there be still some now? Kinzu smiled mysteriously and said nothing. He just followed Daha and Xiaohe with a few people and continued to walk forward. Although the total area of the forest was only a little over 6 acres, after being upgraded by Kinzu, the trees became thick and strong. Walking inside, Kinzu and Dale felt like walking in a primeval forest. In particular, there was a lot of snow piled up on the branches of the trees, and it kept falling down when there was any movement. Daha and Xiaohe, the two little guys, wagged their tails and kept sniffing around with their little noses along the gaps between the trees. They couldn't be careless. For dinner, the two little guys really tried their best. Perhaps because this area had been cleared before, the two little guys searched for a long time, but the harvest was mediocre, and they only found a few fish that had slipped through the net. Woof woof woof. After a long time of not finding the truffles, the two little guys got a little anxious. They hummed a few times and moved their legs a little faster, as if they had added a small electric motor, which made people feel funny. Clean, are there really truffles here? Seeing that the little guy worked so hard but only found a few truffles, Eva asked uncertainly. Yes, Uncle, did you finish digging last time? Shirley was also a little anxious at this time. This was different from before. Why was there no movement for a long time? Maybe, let's go over there and take a look. Kinzu touched his nose, took 2 steps forward, and directed Daha and Xiaohe toward to the other side. This time, few people were disappointed. The little guy just sniffed casually and decided on a few places. Seeing this, Dale took Ween forward and dug a few shovels to get out a few big black lumps. Well, it seems that I didn't find truffles in that forest just now. Maybe it's because the last one was dug up and the new ones haven't grown yet. Kinzu thought to himself that his truffles seemed to be endless and needed a growth cycle. He just didn't know how this cycle was formed. Was it the same as normal truffles, or did it have its own growth time? Uncle, come and see, this one is so big. Shirley's cheerful little voice interrupted Kinzu's meditation. I'm here, what's wrong? Kinzu came to his senses and hurriedly followed. When he got closer, Kinzu found that the little girl and Eva were surrounding a huge pine tree with fluffy branches and leaves, looking at something curiously. Uncle, come and see. Seeing Kinzu come in, the little girl grabbed his big hand and pointed to a big pit in front of the pine tree as if offering up treasure. Kinzu curiously leaned over in the direction pointed by the little girl, and the scene he saw almost made him fall. What the hell is this? Kinzu pointed at a big black thing in the pit, and he was a little uneasy. Damn, is it so scary? Such a big thing, is it a truffle? Should it be a truffle? Eva swallowed her saliva, she was also a little uncertain. Gritting her teeth, Kinzu waved his hand, never mind, get it out first. Kinzu said. Dale and Ween and the other girls did not hesitate, and started to work directly. They didn't care about the value of these things. This time, they didn't directly break the sky in two, which can only be said to be its luck. After Dale carefully dug up all the big truffles, Kinzu and the others finally saw its full appearance. The truffle is oval in shape, with a length of more than 50 centimeters and a diameter of more than 20 centimeters. It looks a bit like an extended version of a football. Yes, even though he was mentally prepared, Kinzu was also shocked by the size of this guy. Clean, this is a little big. Eva stretched out her hands with a dry throat. Hey, how much does the world's largest truffle weigh? Kinzu also felt a little dry in the mouth. If he remembered correctly, it seemed to be about 1.5 kilograms, right? The largest truffle known in the world was dug out by Australian farmer Stuart, weighing 1.5 kilograms. Eva muttered to herself. Then, how heavy is ours? Kinzu asked subconsciously. Eva rolled her eyes helplessly. Clean, do you think I'm God? Can you tell how heavy it is at a glance? Ahem. Kinzu came back to his senses, coughed twice in embarrassment, and hurriedly ordered. Well, hurry up, find a basket to put it in separately, don't break it. Without Kinzu's words, Eva had already made a basket to put this guy in, and handed it directly to Ween. Clean, let Ween send this thing back to the villa first, don't let it bump into anything. Kinzu thought about it, nodded, and praised. Not bad, you are thoughtful. Then, Kinzu looked at Ween again, and warned with some concern. Girl, go slowly on the road, don't drop my treasure. Rolling her eyes, Ween curled her lips with some disdain. It's just a delivery, can it fall? Do you really think of yourself as a child? When Ween walked away, Eva said with a smile. Clean, it's not necessary, although this thing is precious, it doesn't make you value it to this extent, right? What do you know? Kinzu waved his hand, and said proudly. This is not just a matter of money, it's a kind of fame, okay, the world's #1, what a gimmick. Shrugging helplessly, Eva didn't say anything else. She really didn't think as far as Kinzu about these things. After seeing Ween off, Kinzu and his companions continued to search in the grove. This time, Kinzu was careful and marked all the places where truffles had been found. He also wrote the year, month and day with a special red string to determine the time. Thanks to the book friend 20170809444265549 for the reward. Thank you. Chapter 612a. Strange place. The sky gradually darkened, and even with the reflection of the white snow, it was a little unclear in the woods. Bending down and tying a red rope on an old pine tree, Kinzu stood up and said with a smile. let's stop here today. Thank you for your hard work. Eva waved her hand and said nonchalantly, Clean, you are too polite. It's my duty to do something. For these people, this is indeed just a very easy little thing, but for Shirley on the side, it is a bit boring. After the initial novelty, this kind of repetitive digging and looking for truffles can no longer arouse her interest. But she is more sensible, and seeing that the adults are busy, she didn't say it. At this moment, she finally heard her uncle say that he was going back, and the little girl cheered immediately, which scared Daha and Xiaohe, who had just returned from work. Seeing this, Qinzhu smiled and touched the little girl's head, and asked, What's wrong, are you bored? Shirley nodded her little head cutely, and said with a sad face, Yes, I'm bored, and I can't help, I can only watch from the side. Eva smiled and said beside her, This is quite boring, why don't you stay at home tomorrow, there are people in the villa anyway. Hearing Eva say this, Qinzhu looked at the little girl with an inquiring look, wanting to know what she thought. The little girl bit her finger and nodded impatiently. She would rather stay at home to tease the little guys now. Qinzhu smiled and said nothing, and walked back with a few people. After all, finding truffles is not a fun job, so if you don't want to follow, don't follow. After an afternoon of hard work, Qinzhu and his friends, under the snow falling all over the sky, barely advanced less than an acre in the woods. But even so, Sisters Ween and Daya have already carried back several large baskets of truffles. Perhaps because of the spiritual land, the truffles here are particularly abundant and look good. Especially under the old pine trees, not only are the truffles abundant, but they are also much larger than ordinary truffles. Walking along the way, Qinzhu has been thinking that the effect of the spiritual land is really not covered. It seems that I have to study the role of the spiritual land carefully. After breakfast the next day, Qinzhu left the little girl at home, asked the female bodyguards to take good care of her, and then took a few people on the journey again. It was still a small forest, and the teeth that came into view was still the white snow. However, there were no longer so many people this time. In addition to the absence of the little girl, there were 2 more little tigers in the team, and the female bodyguards also followed. There was no way. Although the 2 little huskies were searching very hard, Qinzhu still felt that the efficiency was a bit low. It happened that I went back and saw the 2 little tigers, and I had an idea to bring them out today. Now, in addition to Qinzhu and Eva, Dale, Erica, Ween and Daya, there are 6 more female bodyguards in the team. A total of 12 people, led by the little guys, moved quickly in the open woods. When they arrived at the end of the field, Qinzhu signaled everyone to stop first, and then waved to Daha and Xiaohe. After receiving Qinzhu's order, Daha swung his tail handsomely and jumped out directly. Soon, the little guy stopped under a pine tree and roared excitedly at the ground. Seeing this, Eva took Dale up without waiting for Qinzhu's order. When they arrived in front of Daha, they picked up the small shovel and dug in the selected place very quickly. The new bodyguards following behind also surrounded them, looking at everything in front of them with surprise. After all, they are all human beings, and they are all curious. The desire to explore unknown things is one of the innate and necessary skills of everyone. However, Qinzhu did not satisfy their curiosity. Just as they were watching with great interest, Qinzhu directly pushed aside the crowd and said with a smile, Okay, you will be in trouble later, now just stay aside. The bodyguards were a little disappointed, but they still obediently dispersed. After the bodyguards dispersed, Qinzhu called the 2 lazy tigers, picked up a piece of black truffle, and sniffed it under their noses. After the little guys finished sniffing, Qinzhu pointed at the black truffle in his hand and pointed at the open space next to him. What is this for? Daha opened his little eyes and stared at Qinzhu in confusion, wanting to know what he was going to do. Qinzhu was helpless. Why didn't this guy open his eyes? Look at your Daha, how smart he is. Helplessly, Qinzhu took the 2 little tigers and asked Daha and Xiaohe to demonstrate the process again. Oh. It turns out to be so simple. This is what Daha and Xiao thought. Isn't it just digging the ground to find something? I'm afraid of you. Immediately, Dao and Xiao split up into 2 groups and began to search for their first truffle in the open woods. Woo-ah. Woof woof. Before Qinzhu could arrange things here, a complex sound like a tiger roar and a dog barking came from Dao's side. Hearing the sound, Qinzhu was a little stunned. Did he get a harvest so soon? He quickly handed the half-a-digged truffle on hand to the female bodyguards next to him to deal with, and rushed over with Eva. When he got closer, Qinzhu found that Da Hector was facing an open space, roaring hard. Roaring is not a big deal. I was used to hearing these sounds when I was with a group of beasts. But this guy in front of me, roaring like a tiger for a while, and barking like a dog for a while, Kinzu was really annoyed. Not only him, but even Eva who followed him couldn't help laughing. She had never seen Dieu like this before. Okay, stop yelling. Kinzu bent down and slapped Dieu's not too small head. Woo woo woo. After whimpering a few times, Dieu raised his big head that had just been slapped, and looked at Kinzu with some grievance. In his big head, he couldn't understand why he had to be beaten even though he had found something. Are you saying there are truffles here? Kinzu ignored Dieu's grievance and looked at him curiously. Hearing Kinzu's question, Dieu nodded his little head hurriedly, as if the thing was here, and he looked as sure as he could be. However, Kinzu raised his head, looked around, and then glanced at the surrounding environment. The location that Dieu found was very strange. There were no trees within 1 meter around it. But 2 meters away from it, one in front and one behind, one on the left and one on the right, there was a big pine tree, and judging from the age of the trees, they should be quite old. After looking around, Kinzu retracted his gaze and looked at Eva next to him with some uncertainty. Do you think there will be truffles here? Chapter 613 White Truffle. Eva was silent after hearing this, and rolled her eyes at Kinzu. You'll know if you dig it up. How can I know if there are truffles? Kinzu smiled awkwardly. He just asked subconsciously. Pushing away the tiger who was shaking his tail to ask for credit, Kinzu said nothing more and picked up the shovel to dig directly. To Kinzu's surprise, he felt something was wrong as soon as he dug a shovel. Because he felt that when the shovel went down, it seemed to hit something hard. Fortunately, he was just testing it and had not started to exert force. So when he felt that the shovel hit something, he quickly retracted his strength and did not continue to exert force. Is it such a coincidence? The first shovel hit the target. Kinzu was a little stunned. He retracted the shovel, changed his position, and continued to dig. But what made him a little puzzled was that this shovel was also the same. Just after stepping on it, before he had time to do anything else, he felt that the shovel came from a feeling of touching a hard object. What the hell, is this such a coincidence? Kinzu moved to a slightly farther position and dug with the shovel. But things are often so unexpected. Just when he thought that there would be no more accidents, the shovel gave him a familiar feeling again. This time, Kinzu was not screwed, he became a little uneasy. The distance between the 3 places he dug was more than 50 centimeters. In this case, if there is really a truffle underneath, it must be a huge one. Thinking of this, Kinzu did not dig directly, but was a little excited and chose to start cleaning the soil horizontally bit by bit. Clean, is there really a truffle underneath? Eva asked curiously when she saw this. I don't know if it's a truffle, anyway, there is something underneath, and the shovel just touched it. Kinzu did not raise his head and continued to clean the soil. Eva heard that and stopped watching from the side. She picked up the shovel and joined in. The two worked together and soon dug a small hole in the nearly 30 centimeter thick ground above. Because he didn't know what was underneath, Kinzu was afraid of hurting it. So when they confirmed that they were close to it, the two of them changed to a small wooden shovel and began the last step of cleaning. After another 2 or 3 minutes of cleaning, Kinzu felt that his small shovel had hit a hard object again. Looking up, he met Eva's somewhat surprised eyes, and Kinzu showed a bright smile. Come on, let's see what this is. As the two of them sped up their movements, soon, a touch of white appeared in front of them. Hey, what is this? Kinzu was a little stunned. Where is the expected black truffle? He was just thinking that his luck seemed to be really against the sky, and he got something that was world record level as soon as he made a move. But what appeared in front of him now was not as he imagined, but a huge black truffle that could challenge the world record. And a mysterious object with a milky white color and a seemingly large size. Eva stared at the milky white for a while, and frowned her pretty little eyebrows uncertainly. I don't know, it seems to be a truffle, let's get it out first. Kinzu nodded in agreement, suppressed the disappointment in his heart, and said with a smile, okay, let's get this guy up. At this time, several female bodyguards next to him also surrounded him, and Dale said, Boss, you take a break, let me do it. Kinzu shook his head and didn't say anything. At such an exciting moment, how could he not do it himself? He had thought about it. If it was a useless broken thing, he would just chop it up with a shovel and feed it to the dog. Of course, whether the dog would be willing to eat this unknown thing was not certain. Time passed quickly. In the woods covered with white snow, Kinzu and the others were still carefully struggling with this unknown object. A breeze blew, and the snow that filled the branches fell one after another, making a rustling sound from time to time. Two little huskies lay calmly on the snow-covered ground. For them, fearlessness of the cold is the most basic condition. Their ancestors were Siberian wolves that roamed the ice and snow for hundreds of years. If they are still afraid of such a little snow now, it would be a disgrace to their ancestors. The same as Da Hectors and Shao Hectors are the two jaguars that Kinzu drafted into the army. Although their ancestors are not as cold-resistant as Siberian wolves, they are not afraid of it either. So this level of temperature and weather is totally normal for them. Damn, I finally got you out. In the quiet woods where only the sound of the wind could be heard and there were no birds or flying insects, a burst of excited shouts suddenly rang out. Yes, but the shape is a bit strange. Eva looked at the thing in front of her, which looked like a big mushroom, and continued uncertainly. It seems to be a truffle. Kinzu clapped his hands and stood up, and asked in surprise. Eva, you are not mistaken, is this really a truffle? I am not sure, but I am 5 or 6 times sure. Eva was a little hesitant to guarantee it. After all, she was not a professional gourmet. With her current eyesight, she really couldn't tell whether it was true or not. Damn, if it is really a truffle, then these Americans will be in chaos. Kinzu was thinking about it a little deeply, and didn't notice that his mumbling was heard by Eva next to him. Clean, you're wrong, don't forget, you are also an American. Eva glared at Kinzu with some dissatisfaction. Oh? Well, I mean if it is really a truffle, we will be rich. Kinzu came back to his senses and hurriedly explained with a smile. In fact, the character of xenophobia is not only possessed by a certain person or a certain nation. It's that most people and nations, or countries in the world, have some xenophobia. This can be experienced in many ways. For example, Kinzu is an American now, but he still calls people Americans when he speaks and does things. Of course, these are all private conversations. In formal occasions, he really doesn't have the courage to call them Americans. So, now that this sentence has been heard by an authentic American, Kinzu will be a little embarrassed. However, he has developed a thick skin now. After a brief embarrassment, Kinzu returned to his original state and began to chase Eva to ask about the origin of this thing. Eva frowned and said uncertainly, Clean, I think this should be white truffles, right? Chapter 614 Something's wrong. White truffles are wild plant fungi similar to mushrooms and porcini. So far, white truffles have only been found in Italy and Croatia in the Balkans. The color of white truffles is slightly golden, light brown, beige, or light brown, with tan or milky white patches or fine textures. The smell is between garlic and at best Parmesan cheese. Generally, the small ones are as big as golf balls, while the large ones are like apples. In the best years, the global production of white truffles is only 3 tons. Compared with the annual production of black truffles of about 35 tons, you can imagine how precious it is. How could such a precious and unique white truffle appear here? Kinzu was puzzled. Until Chainmew pushed open the door of the villa and ran in hurriedly, Kinzu still maintained a thinking posture on the sofa. Chainmew was not polite. He sat down on the sofa opposite Kinzu, loosened the buttons of his coat, ignored his thoughtful look, and asked impatiently, Boss, what happened? Why are you calling me here so urgently? Awakened by Chainmew's voice, Kinzu came back to his senses, subconsciously touched his nose with his hand, and asked, Brother Chen, do you think it is possible to produce white truffles here? White truffles? Chainmew looked at Kinzu with an idiot look, and said with a dumb smile, Boss, don't you know? Except for Italy and Croatia in the Balkan Peninsula, there is no trace of white truffles anywhere in the world. How can we have it here? Is it impossible? Kinzu was not angry, but nodded thoughtfully, muttering to himself. Chainmew heard Kinzu's muttering, shook his head gently, and said with a very firm attitude, Boss, this is absolutely impossible. Impossible. At first, Chainmew was still very firm and decisive. But as he was talking, Chainmew felt something was wrong. It was impossible for Kinzu to call him here so urgently for no reason and ask such a boring question. Moreover, it seemed that black truffles had just been produced here before. Thinking of this, Chainmew became a little uneasy. He looked up at Kinzu with astonishment. Could it be that this guy really made white truffles? Kinzu did not continue to tease him. He pointed his hand back casually. Yes, it's there, go and see for yourself. Chainmew stood up with a bang. Following the target of Kinzu's finger, his eyes were also fixed on the big thing covered by a piece of red silk on the coffee table next to him. After taking a few quick steps, Chen Mu untied the red silk with trembling hands. In an instant, his eyes were a little straight. Is this a white truffle? Looking at the white truffle that looked like a big mushroom, Chen Mu's voice seemed to be squeezed out from his throat, ethereal and with a little trembling. Having been a chef for decades, he has handled hundreds of kilograms of truffles. He can recognize whether it is real or fake at a glance. But it is precisely because he recognized it that Chen Mu is a little unsure. Where did this truffle come from? When did truffles become so big? And it is a white truffle. Chen Mu didn't care about his appearance at this time. He lay on the coffee table, put his nose close to the white truffle that was more than 70 centimeters high, and sniffed hard. Yes, it's absolutely right. This is definitely an authentic Italian white truffle. Looking up, Chen Mu looked at Qinzu excitedly, looking forward to his answer. Being stared at by a big man with such eager eyes, Qinzu coughed awkwardly. Well, don't look at me, I'm also confused now. As he said, Qinzu repeated everything that happened today to Chen Mu. Listening to Qinzu's story, Chen Mu's big mouth never closed. Boss, are you saying that you dug up a big black truffle today? Qinzu nodded, pointed to a place next to him, and said casually, it's there, but it's much smaller than this one. Chen Mu swallowed his saliva and wanted to curse loudly, but he couldn't say anything. This feeling is really fucking. Don't be in a daze, come and give me some advice, what's going on? Seeing Chen Mu was in a daze, Qinzu was a little anxious. He didn't ask you to come here to watch the fun. On the one hand, it was because the effect of the spiritual land was too good. On the other hand, he was also worried that these things would be sold to customers. After all, this can be regarded as forcing things to grow, right? What's going on? How do I know what's going on? Chen Mu sorted out his mood, showed a bright smile and said, Boss, who cares, we have ingredients to sell, right? Qinzu rolled his eyes. Of course he knew that it would be fine if we sold it according to the ingredients, and people were scrambling for it. But sometimes, things can't be done that way. It's not about conscience or whether you were a good person or not, it's purely for peace of mind. Besides, if the customer is hurt by the food, he will be in trouble. What should we do? How about we go and test it? Chen Mu also reacted at this time. It must be abnormal for Qinzu to come here. Come to think of it, it has been so many years, and I haven't heard of truffles being found here. How come Qinzu came here, not only black truffles, but also white truffles? Seeing that Chen Mu agreed with his opinion, Qinzu also made up his mind, waved to even next to him, and ordered, go cut a little bit of white truffles and black truffles, and take them to a research institute in Boston for testing. Boss, leave these to me. Chen Mu hurriedly took on the task when he saw this. It was just a matter of convenience anyway. Okay, then you can take it with you on the way. I'll pay you a little more so that the results can come out sooner. Since Chen Mu took the initiative to ask, Qinzu didn't insist. After he finished, he handed the sample to him. After the deal was settled, Chen Mu looked at the two big guys on the coffee table with some envy, and asked tentatively, Boss, should I take these truffles back first? Qinzu thought about it. Although the results were not out, he couldn't just wait like this, right? After careful consideration for a while, Qinzu asked, Brother Chen, you have been selling black truffles for a while. Have you found anything unusual about the customers? Abnormal? Chen Mu heard this, touched his chin and pondered for a while, and said thoughtfully, Boss, now that you say that, it seems that there is something wrong. Qinzu was stunned, and immediately became nervous, and asked hurriedly, What's going on? What's wrong? Thanks to Shinxin's father for giving Liu 5,000 starting coins and full subscription support, he was promoted to another helmsman of this book. The helmsman added 2 chapters, which are temporarily out and will be updated later. Chapter 615. The first bird to stand out gets shot. Boss, don't be impatient, listen to me. Chen Mu waved his hand, with a strange expression on his face. After hesitating for a long time, he said, It's just that recently, there are obviously more customers ordering truffles, and sometimes they will order more after finishing one serving, so our inventory is consumed a lot. Qinzu breathed a sigh of relief when he heard this, and rolled his eyes at this guy unhappily. I'm talking about whether there are any adverse reactions. What's so strange about this? Chen Mu shook his head in disapproval. Boss, you don't know this. The price of truffle products in our store is not cheap, and they are all used as seasonings. Most people just try it, and they don't eat it as a meal. Qinzu heard that it seemed to be the same. After all, truffles are not potatoes, and they are not used as staple food. But why is that? Could it be? Recalling the eager expressions of the little guys when they were eating vegetables, Kinzu felt that he seemed to have grasped something, so he looked at Chen Mu and said, "Look, Brother Chen, I have a lot of vegetables here, you can take some back when you go back later." Vegetables? Chen Mu was a little stunned, looking at Kinzu with a smile. "Boss, no way, you don't even care about these things?" Chen Mu was feeling a little surprised now. "You said that you monopolized high-end ingredients such as beef and seafood, so why didn't you let go of even a little bit of vegetables? You know, vegetables need to be fresh. From Boston to the ranch, the round-trip shipping cost, let alone saving money, it's good enough not to lose money. What are you thinking? Am I such a stingy person?" Although Kinzu didn't know Chen Mu's specific thoughts, he guessed that it was almost right. He glared at this guy in anger. Is he such a money grubber? Ahem, boss, that's not what I meant. Chen Mu laughed twice. He then remembered that the man in front of him was a rich man, and he was also very generous. He didn't seem like someone who wanted to save a few dollars on shipping. But since it wasn't for saving shipping, then what was it for? Kinzu waved his hand and didn't let Chen Mu continue to think about it. Instead, he said directly, "Why don't you worry about it? I will have someone send fresh vegetables over every morning. You can use them first." Being blocked by Kinzu, Chen Mu almost spit out a mouthful of blood. Isn't this uncomfortable? No wonder people often say that curiosity kills the cat. Chen Mu is in this state now. He's itching in his heart because of Kinzu's teasing. Although he was a little dissatisfied, the restaurant belonged to someone else. No matter what, he had to do it. Chen Mu had no way to refute it, so he had to agree with depression. After dealing with Chen Mu, Kinzu asked Eva to go to the vegetable garden and pick some of the vegetables commonly used in the restaurant, and loaded them into the car for Chen Mu. Shaking his head with a wry smile, Chen Mu looked at several large boxes of black truffles and said helplessly, "Boss, if this happens, I can't take all of these." Kinzu smiled nonchalantly. "It's okay, if you can't take them all, just take less, and come back next time, there will be more later anyway." After sending Chen Mu, who was somewhat helpless, away, Kinzu and the others returned to the villa, and Eva asked, "Clean, are you going to continue digging for truffles?" Kinzu shook his head. "Forget it, let's pause first and wait for the results to come out." Then Eva asked hesitantly, "Should we take some protective measures in the woods? After all, these truffles." Although she didn't say the latter words, Kinzu understood what she meant. She was worried about the cowboys on the ranch. After all, truffles are enough for their annual salary. "Okay, you'll let Dale take care of it." Kinzu hesitated for a moment, but still nodded in agreement. After everyone left, Kinzu sat on the sofa in a daze, and he didn't know what he was thinking in his mind. The test results of truffles came out in just 2 days under Chen Mu's money offensive. When Kinzu took the 2 thin test reports from Chen Mu, who looked strange, his expression also became very strange. "You mean, our truffles, all kinds of ingredients, are far more than ordinary truffles?" Kinzu shook the documents in his hand and looked at Chen Mu in surprise. "Yes, boss," Chen Mu smiled excitedly. "Although this report is expedited, its accuracy is beyond doubt, and this institute is not only in Boston, but also has a good reputation in the United States and the world." Kinzu nodded thoughtfully, and after thinking for a moment, he said, "So, should we publish this research data? Directly announce that we can artificially grow truffles?" Kinzu thought Chen Mu would definitely agree to this, but he didn't expect him to wave his hands vigorously. "Boss, you must not talk about this now." "Why?" Kinzu was a little puzzled. Such a big news would definitely bring great popularity to his Mandarin restaurant. Chen Mu scratched his head in some embarrassment, and under Kinzu's gaze, he slowly uttered a sentence. "The first bird to stick its head out will be shot. The first bird to stick its head out will be shot." Kinzu blinked, as if he understood something. Chen Mu nodded vigorously. "Yes, boss, our ancestors have said that the first bird to stick its head out will be shot. If you just accidentally find a place where truffles are produced, it's not a big deal. Although people will be jealous of your good luck, they can't do anything about it in your territory. But if you say that you have cultivated the technology to artificially grow truffles, it will definitely arouse the jealousy of most people, and some people will even try every means to get this technology. This shouldn't be that serious, right?" Kinzu swallowed his saliva, imagining the scene of those guys coming one after another to snatch the technology, and couldn't help but shudder. As the saying goes, you don't have to worry about thieves stealing, but you have to worry about thieves thinking about it. If someone thinks about it, then you will have a hard time in the future. Thinking of this, Qinzu waved his hand quickly. Forget it, just say that it is a place of origin that was discovered accidentally, and the output is not large. Chen Mu nodded in agreement and asked, what about the price? Should we adjust it? Of course we should adjust it. Qinzu nodded as a matter of course, the output is not much, and now the product has such a good effect. If we don't raise the price, others will think we are fools, right? Chen Mu smiled twice and asked tentatively, then how much should we raise the price? Qinzu hesitated for a moment, touched his chin and said, then let's double it first. What? Chen Mu was stunned. Double it directly. Thanks to the 4,500 starting coins reward and full subscription support from the book friend Joshua Shapa, our ranch has gained another helmsman, and Liuun is honored. For one helmsman plus 2 chapters, Liuun now owes a total of 5 chapters, which will be made up as soon as possible. Chapter 616 Popular Vegetables. Yes, double it directly. Qinzu nodded calmly. Hey, boss, isn't that too much? Chen Mu forced a smile that was uglier than crying. His original idea was to raise it by about 30%, after all, the price of truffles was already very high. He thought he was cruel enough, but he didn't expect Qinzu to be much more cruel than him. Is the nutritional value of our truffles much higher than before? Qinzu asked. Yes. Chen Mu nodded. Is the taste of our truffles much better than before? Qinzu asked again. Yes. Chen Mu nodded again. Is the output of our truffles much less than others? Qinzu asked for the last time. This should be it. Chen Mu looked at Qinzu strangely, and didn't dare to say it. Who knows when you'll bring me another basket? Ahem, Qinzu coughed twice unnaturally under Chen Mu's gaze, and then said righteously, since our nutrition is higher than its, tastes better than its, and the output is less than its, why can't we just double it? Chen Mu was silent for a moment, then looked at Qinzu weakly, and said, we are not as famous as it. Qinzu's request for a price increase was not finally realized. It's not that he couldn't raise the price because Chen Mu opposed it. But Qinzu himself finally realized that something can be sold at a high price, not just because of its taste and nutrition. The most important thing is publicity. Is the reason why white truffles are so famous because its taste is really worth it? No, its taste is not worth the price. The reason why it is so valuable is that in the 1950s and 1960s, the white truffle king was given as a gift by smart Italian truffle merchants to the most famous people in the world. For example, Churchill, Marilyn Monroe, Hitchcock, Pavarotti and Gorbachev. The star halo plus the magical effect of white truffles have doubled the value of white truffles, making it a top international food ingredient. Therefore, Qinzu's delusion of doubling the price directly through its nutritional content or taste is almost impossible. Chen Mu's suggestion is to increase it by 30% first to see how the market reacts. If the effect is good, then at the time, the price will be raised again on the grounds of production. Qinzu thought about it and agreed. Anyway, the restaurant was handed over to Chen Mu, and he didn't want to intervene too much. As for why he wanted to raise the price of white truffles, well, he just felt that it was a bit of a disadvantage to let these Americans eat such a good thing so cheaply. After the conversation ended, Chen Mu looked down at the time. When he looked up again, there was still a hint of embarrassment on his face. Qinzu was stunned and asked with a smile, what's wrong? Just say it if you have anything to say. Chen Mu's face became more embarrassed when he heard it, but after thinking for a while, he gritted his teeth and said, it's like this, boss, can you get some more vegetables today? The last one has been sold out. Why, brother Chen, are the vegetables selling well? Qinzu laughed a few times with a hint of ridicule. Looking at Chen Mu opposite the sofa with a playful look, you made me look at you that day, you know you regret it now, right? Chen Mu smiled awkwardly and said, well, it's selling well, and some are out of stock. After saying that, he lowered his head, which was really shameless. The last time Qinzu gave him vegetables, he still disliked that they took up space, and even felt that the boss was too stingy, so he didn't want to bring them. But only 2 days later, he had to run over here, hoping to get some vegetables back. The reason is that these vegetables are so damn easy to sell. When has he ever seen such a scene? The vegetables that were originally used as side dishes ended up selling better than beef. There was no other way, so he had to take advantage of the time to deliver the test report today to hope to bring back a truckload of vegetables. Well, he has already brought the car. After leaving the villa, Kinzu looked at Kim Chun-mu's car today with a strange look on his face, a box-type refrigerated truck. It seems that this guy has been prepared for a long time. Since he has made all the preparations, Kinzu did not waste any words and directly asked Eva to help Chen-mu load the whole car. Before leaving, Chen-mu licked his face and asked, "Boss, when do you think we will start to provide special side dishes for our restaurant?" This? Kinzu hesitated for a moment, and then said, "How about this? Starting from tomorrow, I will provide your restaurant with 100 kilograms of vegetables every morning. Should that be enough?" Chen-mu heard this and nodded hurriedly. Enough, 100 kilograms is absolutely no problem. After all, it is a Western restaurant, and beef is the best seller, because apart from salads, there is no place in the restaurant that specifically needs vegetables. Therefore, Chen-mu feels that this 100 kilograms is absolutely enough for a Western restaurant. Not only him, but also Kinzu thought so. After seeing Chen-mu off, Kinzu did not return to the villa, but wandered to the vegetable field. The vegetable field has never changed its color since the vegetables grew up. It is all emerald green, with occasional scattered red and yellow. 1 acre, 6 acres of vegetable fields, do not look too small. Kinzu estimated that 100 kilograms a day, with a casual combination, there is still no problem here. And he is not just picking blindly, but also sprinkles some seasonal vegetable seeds on the open space after harvesting from time to time. Of course, can they survive? Kinzu has never worried about these things. Not to mention the magical use of the spiritual land, the seeds transformed with the spiritual liquid are not so easy to die. But all this is not what Kinzu cares about now. After walking around the vegetable field, he felt that he could keep up with the progress, so he turned back. Back at the villa, Kinzu waved and called Dale over, and ordered, "Starting tomorrow, send someone to drive and deliver 100 kilograms of vegetables from our vegetable garden to the store every day." "Meritage Restaurant?" Dale asked back. Kinzu smiled and nodded, "Yes, it's Chen-mu's store." Dale nodded, indicating that she understood. Seeing this, Kinzu turned his head and looked at Eva next to him. Before he started to speak, Eva smiled and said, "Clean, don't worry, I will get 100 kilograms of vegetables for my sister every morning." After arranging the things in the store, Kinzu stretched and lay listlessly on a sofa. He didn't have a good rest because of the 2 truffles. Although the money is not a lot of money, it is stable. This is a business after all. Although salvaging sunken ships and looking for treasures is definitely more profitable than running a restaurant. But after all, it doesn't sound so good to say it out. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subieron sin esfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 617 Zumengyo is coming. There is indeed more rain and snow in Boston in winter. The second snow came quietly before the first snow had time to melt. Clearly, when Kinzu opened the curtains and looked at the wide world outside, he was in a daze. Although he was born in the south, he has a special expectation for snow. But if it keeps snowing, he will feel that he can no longer love it. After finishing the video with Zumengyo, Kinzu walked into the bathroom and started to wash up. This girl is now sticking to him tightly. She will find him for a video almost every day. She doesn't want to hang up until work time. Thinking of Zumengyo's coquettish look in the video, Kinzu felt itchy. However, thinking of this girl saying that she will be here soon, Kinzu felt uneasy again. To be honest, Kinzu likes Zumengyo. After all, this girl was the object of his fantasy when he was in school. But after he became rich, his heart inevitably swelled. It's not that he doesn't like Zumengyo anymore, but while he likes Zumengyo, he thinks Eva, the foreign girl, is also very good. And there are also Mobeka and Onid. Kinzu thinks he likes them all. Well, Kinzu's face didn't blush at all, he thinks he just likes them. Whether it's because of their figure or appearance, he just likes them. But now the question is, how should he explain to Zumengyo? Could it be that I love you, but I also love someone else at the same time, so you two can sleep together in the same bed with me? Thinking of the consequences, Kinzu shuddered involuntarily. I guess Zumengyo, that girl, would kill him directly, right? After wiping his face casually, Kinzu changed his clothes and went downstairs. He didn't think too much about it now. There must be a way when the car reaches the mounting, so he would take it one step at a time. After a quick look, there was no one in the living room. Even the bodyguard who usually stayed with him was nowhere to be seen. Although Kinzu was a little curious, he didn't think much about it. He walked into the restaurant, picked up the bread on the table and put it in the oven. He heated it for a while, spread some butter on it, and ate it in big mouthfuls. Before he finished eating a piece of bread, the door of the villa was pushed open from the outside. With a whistling cold wind, Eva and a few women shook off the snow on their bodies under the porch before walking in. Kinzu sat on the sofa and looked at the few people. He drank a sip of hot milk comfortably and asked casually, "What's wrong? Where did you go?" Eva walked in, stroked her wet hair, and said with a smile, "I just sent 100 kilograms of vegetables to Chenmu. Their business has been getting better and better these days." Kinzu nodded when he heard it. He also heard that the restaurant's business has been getting better and better these days. Chenmu even called him and wanted to increase the supply of vegetables. After hesitating for a long time, Kinzu still didn't agree. It was not for anything else, but because things are rare, they are expensive. If the supply is open, who knows, others may not be so enthusiastic. After listening to Kinzu's explanation, Chenmu agreed with it and did not talk about it, but urged Kinzu to get more seafood ingredients. Kinzu felt a headache when talking about this. Will was originally planning to go out to sea in the next 2 days, but he knew that the snow would not stop falling. He stood up and walked to the French window, looking out through the high-strength alloy glass. Several lush pine trees were covered with a thick layer of snow, and the thick branches were slightly bent downward. Not only that, the heavy snow in the sky was falling down as if it was free, which made Kinzu feel a little annoyed. "Uncle, don't you like snow?" Seeing that Kinzu didn't look happy, the little girl leaned over with some confusion. In her little head, snowing is a very fun thing. Kinzu carried the little girl back to the sofa, touched her little head, and said with a smile, "Of course Uncle likes snow, but now the snow delays Uncle's business, so Uncle doesn't like it." The little girl nodded as if she understood, and snuggled in Kinzu's arms without saying anything else. Kinzu sat on the sofa and thought for a while. Since Zumengya was come in, it would be inappropriate for so many women to live in his villa. Looking up at Dale in the multi-purpose hall, Kinzu waved his hand and motioned her to come over. When Dale came to his side, Kinzu thought for a while and said, "It's not appropriate for Erika and the others to live here all the time. There are still a few empty rooms over at the cowboy apartment. You can help them clean up and let them live there." Dale was a little surprised to hear this. "It was you who asked them to live here at the beginning. Why did you change your mind?" But she was smart and didn't refute anything, but agreed very happily. Anyway, the cowboy apartment was not far from here, and she could rush back quickly if anything happened. After solving the problem of so many women in his villa, Kinzu began to look forward to Zumengyo's arrival. However, Zumengyo would not come over in a day or two, so Kinzu did not say anything after making some arrangements. On the contrary, he still needed to worry about Chenmu's affairs. The snow kept falling, and it was not easy for Will to go out to sea. And even if he went out to sea, whether he could get those top-quality seafood was also a big problem. So, all these depended on Kinzu to find a solution. As for what solution? Kinzu smiled, lay on his back on the sofa, and turned his thoughts directly to cheese. In the quiet seabed, Kinzu slowly opened his eyes and looked at the surrounding environment. This was also his first reaction every time he switched his vision. There was no way, the switching time was very fast, and there was no time to react at all. As long as the thought moved, the vision could be transferred instantly. But there was also a problem with this. For example, last time, Kinzu was eating, and the moment Kinzu's vision turned, the bloody scene suddenly appeared in front of him, almost making him vomit directly. And this time, it was not the most fatal. The most fatal time was that just when Kinzu's vision changed, a bloody mouth suddenly appeared in front of him. It turned out that Cheese was fighting with a 7 or 8 meter long mutant tiger shark. Kinzu's sudden appearance made Cheese's reaction a little slow, and he was almost bitten in half by the mutant big guy. Fortunately, Kinzu's reaction was fast enough. After a daze, he quickly rolled over. Although it was a bit ugly, it must be said that this action was very effective. After Kinzu reacted, of course he was not willing to be outdone, and directly solved the opponent with a big move. However, this also made Kinzu discover a problem. Thanks to the 10,000 starting coins reward and full subscription support from the crazy demon dragon god, Leon is honored, and the ranch is also honored to have another helmsman again. One helmsman has 2 chapters, and Leon currently owes 7 chapters. Chapter 618 Dragon Grouper. For some reason, Kinzu found that Cheese would not use his ultimate move after he was out of control. Otherwise, if he could use his ultimate move to deal with such a guy, he would be able to take off a layer of skin even if he didn't die. Shaking his head, Kinzu stopped thinking about the things he couldn't figure out, and directly attributed the reason to the fact that Cheese's intelligence was not high enough. After comparing the small map, Kinzu determined his position and began to wander around the nearby sea. Although the several ingredients that Chain Mew wanted were not as scarce as bluefin tuna, it was not easy to find them in the face of this endless ocean. After wandering around for a while, Kinzu encountered a lot of fish, but they were all small fish and shrimps, basically no big guys, not to mention those rare fish species. But Kinzu was not disappointed. The sea was so big and so deep, and this place was not within the scope of the fishing grounds, so it was normal not to have any harvest. Sure enough, after swimming forward for a while, Kinzu found his target. A group of foraging. The giant grouper, also known as the giant grouper and piglet grouper, is a warm-water marine bottom fish. They are long and oval in shape, with flat sides and a slightly large mouth. There are many blue-black spots on their heads, sides and fins. They are a large and precious edible fish. The length of an adult giant grouper is generally between 60 centimeters and 70 centimeters, and the weight is generally around 30 kilograms to 40 kilograms. However, according to records, in July 1999, fishermen caught a female giant grouper alive near the Dongsha Islands, weighing 180 kilograms, and was regarded as the king of giant groupers. It can be seen that their maximum body length can reach 2 meters, and their weight is also over 100 kilograms to 180 kilograms. The size of the group of giant groups discovered by Kinzu exceeded the average, and basically reached about 1.2 meters. However, the fish was found, but how to take it back became a big problem. Backpack. It can be, but they are not a whole, and only one can be put in at a time. Kinzu looked at the few empty spaces in his backpack and shook his head helplessly. If he couldn't put the things in the backpack, how could he take them away? Scanning his eyes in the backpack, Kinzu accidentally caught a glimpse of something. Container. Kinzu had no place to dispose of the container he had used to carry things last time, and it was not used at home, so he just threw it all in the backpack. Seeing it at this moment, Kinzu was suddenly overjoyed. This thing seemed to be able to hold some things. He did it as soon as he thought of it. Kinzu's mind moved, and a dark container suddenly appeared in front of him, and it slowly sank to the bottom of the sea with the waves. Kinzu saw it, and quickly twisted his body a few times to follow it, and gently supported it with his tail to prevent the thing from turning the door down. When the container slowly sank to the bottom of the sea, Kinzu used the tip of his tail to pick it up, and the door of the container was opened. Seeing that the fish had been put away, the next step was for Kinzu to find fish. As for how to get those guys to come in obediently, Kinzu's method was also very simple. He twisted his huge body and rushed towards the school of fish. Ignoring the panicked school of fish, Kinzu stretched his big tail straight, and danced quickly like a thick steel pipe. For a while, a wave of nuclear waves was set off in the seawater more than 50 meters away from the sea surface. When the school of fish dispersed and the waves gradually calmed down, there were more than a dozen giant groups sliding down with their eyes rolled up in front of Kinzu. And looking at their huge size, they are definitely the best among the group of giant groupers. Without rushing to chase the escaping school of fish, Kinzu used his tail to roll up a few giant groups that were constantly sliding down in the seawater, and swam quickly towards the container. When he arrived at the door of the container, Kinzu flicked his tail, and several giant groups that had been knocked unconscious did not even have the consciousness to resist, and were thrown directly into the container. After several rounds of tossing and turning, Kinzu threw more than a dozen giant groups into the container. Looking at the groups floating in all directions, Kinzu closed the door of the container again. He didn't use much force this time. If these guys woke up and ran away, who would he go to for justice? After doing all this, Kinzu looked at the fish that had not run far and had stopped to watch the excitement, and showed a hideous smile. Since you don't want to run, come and accompany your good friends. After muttering this sentence in his heart, Kinzu twisted his body and quickly chased after the fish, and before they could react, there was another round of flying sticks. According to this routine, Kinzu went back and forth 2 or 3 times, and after getting dozens of groupers, he finally made those guys figure it out. Run quickly, if we don't run, we can't escape. I don't know who shouted in the school of fish, and all of a sudden, the giant groups that were walking and stopping, ran forward. Kinzu was a little disappointed when he saw this. You said you could stay here for a few days peacefully, but that wouldn't work. Why are you always running around? But do you think you can escape the clutches of my master like this? After thinking about it, Kinzu turned around and ran back. After seeing the container, he put away an idea, and then turned around and chased after them again. Kinzu was sticking to them now. There were quite a lot of giant groupers, densely packed with hundreds of them. Even if he didn't catch all of them, he would catch most of them. In this way, Kinzu hung behind them leisurely. As long as they stopped, Kinzu took out the container and rushed up to stir them up. When these guys fled in a hurry, Kinzu put away the container again and continued to hang behind them. Slowly, the group of giant groups went from hundreds to more than 100, and then gradually became only a few. Satisfied, he threw the last giant grouper in, and looked at the almost full container, and nodded with satisfaction. Of course, it was impossible for Kinzu to buy all the hundreds of giant groupers. On the way of hurried escape, many fell behind, but in order not to lose the main group, Kinzu simply gave up the scattered small fish and shrimps. Anyway, up to now, although Kinzu has not counted them, he can still determine the approximate number in his mind. There are less than 200, only more than 100 giant groupers. Kinzu doesn't know much about the value of giant groupers, but he has mentioned it in his usual chats, so he laughed so happily after the end. Although I don't know how this kind of fish tastes, but I think it is still very good to be sought after by everyone. Chapter 619 Stonefish. After putting away the container, Kinzu wandered aimlessly on the seabed. He had been chasing and catching up all the way, and he had run a long way without realizing it. After checking the small map, Kinzu determined his position. This was a sea area more than 100 nautical miles away from the coastline, and the water depth was more than 50 meters, which was not much different from before. Well, it was not far from his ranch. Kinzu muttered to himself, and his big tail swayed unconsciously. Any seabed reefs that blocked the way would be whipped away by his tail. This was also a way for him to vent when he was bored. However, when his tail whipped away a huge rock on the seabed again, Kinzu felt something was wrong. What was wrong? It was the feeling of the tail this time. There was something wrong with the rock. It seemed that it was not whipped on the rock, but on a piece of soft meat. Just when he was wondering, he saw that the rock that was whipped away suddenly moved slowly. Fuck, what's going on? Kinzu's hair stood up. A rock on the seabed could move? Is this a spirit? Without thinking too much, Kinzu quickly stepped back and kept a safer distance from this guy, and then carefully looked at the big stone. It doesn't matter if you look at it, Kinzu almost couldn't help cursing again. This is not a stone, it's obviously a fish, okay? He was also a little scared. Since he ran into a sea area unconsciously last time and saw a python several tens of meters long, Kinzu has been more awed by the boundless seabed. Or to be more direct, he is afraid. He believes that there are still many mysterious powers in this world. And the boundless seabed is the easiest place for these mysterious powers to appear, so he has always been cautious. Even if he is 10 meters long, he didn't think about going to the deep sea for a walk. Why? Just afraid that he won't be able to come back after going. Shaking his big head, Kinzu slowly moved up, staring at the big stone carefully for a long time, and finally matched it with a special sea fish in his mind. Stonefish is known as the most poisonous fish in the world. Its fatal sting is described as the most painful sting for humans. These guys look very ugly, just like the one in front of you, with a smooth body and no scales, a grey stone spine, and faint stone-like markings. The bulging fish belly is white with a reddish tint, the tail is flat and slightly narrow, the body is nearly 80 centimeters long, the body is thick and round with many tumor-like protrusions, like the skin of a toad. Looking at the whole, Kinzu couldn't help shaking his head. This guy can really be said to be the ugliest fish in the world. Moreover, these guys especially like to hide on the seabed or under the reefs, disguising themselves as an inconspicuous stone. Even if people stand next to it, it will not move, so you can't find it. But if someone accidentally steps on it, it will immediately fight back without hesitation and emit deadly poison. In particular, the dozen or so needle-like sharp dorsal spines on its back can easily penetrate the soles of shoes and pierce the soles of the feet, causing people to be poisoned quickly and in severe pain until death. However, on the contrary, although they look ugly and are highly poisonous, their meat is very tender and has no thorns. Moreover, the nutritional value of stonefish is very high. It has the medicinal effects of promoting body fluid and moistening the lungs. Especially for people with bad skin, it can also play a role in beauty. Even the Compendium of Materia Medica written by Li Shizhen, a medical scientist in the Ming dynasty of China, said that stonefish can treat muscle and bone pain and has the effect of warming the middle and replenishing deficiency. Qin Zhu stared at this guy, who was as big as 2 footballs, for a long time, and his saliva almost flowed out. It was not the first time that he heard of the name of stonefish. As an unqualified foodie, when he was in China, he had been listening to his colleagues talking about these delicious and precious ingredients. It was just a pity that he could only listen, because these guys were worth more than him. Smashing his lips, Qin Zhu swallowed a mouthful of saliva. These guys can't be eaten raw, they still have to be cooked to taste good. By the way, remember that these guys should live in groups, right? Qin Zhu suddenly remembered something, raised his big head, and looked around carefully. Sure enough, there were a lot of gravel scattered in this sea area. If you don't look carefully, you really can't find anything. Since you are loading stones, don't blame me for treating you as real stones. Qin Zhu smiled and took out a new container with his mind. After putting it in place and opening the door, he excitedly began his performance. Yes, performance. It's like playing football, aiming at a stone, with a force on the tail, and with a swish, the ball went in. Fortunately, he also knew the measure and controlled the force just right, which could whip these guys away, but not to the point of whipping them to death. After being busy for more than half an hour, Qin Zhu kicked more than 60 balls in total, with a very good hit rate, almost reaching 100%. Except for one guy who was not honest and wanted to assist after being kicked out, he got off the track and hit the container directly, and turned into a flat stone. This also made those guys who wanted to assist calm down. Forget it, it's just a change of place to live, no big deal. Thinking of this, many guys stayed in the container honestly, unaware of what fate awaited them. Twisting his body, Qin Zhu felt a little tired after waving his tail so many times in a row. After closing the door of the container and putting it away, he lay there and didn't want to move anymore. I have to say that playing football is really a physical job. After resting for about 10 minutes, Qin Zhu felt strong and shook his body, ready to continue strolling. It's rare for me to have the mood to go out to sea, so I'd better look for what I can find first. The huge body swam slowly on the seabed, and the deterrents emanating from it made some small fish and shrimps panic and flee. Of course, except for the stupid stonefish, it thought it was lying there like a real stone. After swimming for a while, when passing a patch of algae, Qin Zhu made another unexpected discovery. Slender bodies swam slowly in the seaweed, some were black, some were red, or some were both white and black. These guys were not rare fish, but a very rare group of guys, sea snakes. Well, Qin Zhu felt that sea snakes were really rare. He wandered around the seabed for most of the day, and only found some in the seaweed here. Qin Zhu discovered them, and these guys certainly discovered Qin Zhu as well. When they saw the guy in front of them, with a huge body like a prehistoric behemoth, they immediately lowered their proud heads. Thank you to the master named Shushaba for the reward of 10,000 starting coins. Thank you, master. Liu Yun is excited. I owe a total of 9 chapters. I will work hard today to write and strive for 10,000 chapters. Chapter 620. Shrimp and crab war. In the animal world, the stronger the king. Especially for snakes, which have a strict hierarchy. When Qin Zhu appeared in front of them, these guys chose to surrender. Including the original leader of this group of sea snakes, a spotted sea snake about 3 meters long. Seeing that the longest of these guys was only more than 3 meters, Qin Zhu lost interest at once, gave them a coordinate, and sent them away. Under the strict hierarchy, this group of sea snakes had no complaints about leaving their territory. Under the leadership of the leader, they swam quickly towards their destination. The coordinates Qin Zhu gave them were the place where the group of sea snakes originally gathered, a reed-lined sea area not far from the ranch. Although it is not known what these guys are for now, Qin Zhu still wants to gather them together first. Even if it is to prevent these guys from endangering the safety of fishermen, Qin Zhu also feels that this is necessary. Just after swimming forward for a while, Qin Zhu's eyes lit up. Is today's luck really so good? In his sight, several blue marlins over 1 meter long appeared. The meat of these guys is also very good. Qin Zhu did not hesitate, and wanted to rush up with a swing of his tail. However, the next moment, he stopped his body abruptly, turned around, and quickly found a reed to hide, for fear that the group of animals would notice him. Behind that blue marlins, hundreds of blue marlins appeared densely. Moreover, each of them was more than 1 meter long. The straight and sharp spear in front was daunting. This group of animals was so shameless. They sent out hundreds of them at a time, and they actually used this tactic. Thinking about the scene of him rushing up stupidly and being surrounded by hundreds of spears, Kinzu shuddered involuntarily. Although he could kill 5 or even 10 of them, if he killed hundreds of them, he would definitely be poked into a dice. Damn, it's so insidious. After the group of guys walked away, Kinzu jumped out from behind the reef, cursing. After thinking for a while, Kinzu still didn't stay where he was. Who knows if these guys will come back to kill him. Twisting their huge bodies, they are hard to deal with. After swimming quickly for more than 10 minutes, Kinzu slowed down after he felt that he should have gotten away from the group of animals. It didn't matter if he stopped. Kinzu immediately found something wrong. The place where he stopped now is still 5 or 6 meters away from the seabed. Although this distance was not too low, it could also allow him to clearly see everything happening on the seabed. For example, a group of densely packed little ones were moving at a slow and firm speed. The turquoise shell, a pair of majestic front claws, and several pairs of densely packed front feet. If it wasn't the lobster Kinzu was targeting, what else could it be? And looking at the number, Kinzu couldn't help but smack his lips. There were so many, so many. At a glance, they were so dense that they couldn't be counted. And judging from their body sizes, they are basically 34 centimeters long, and some of them are as long as 60 or 70 centimeters. It's a good thing to eat delicious food that's delivered to your door. Kinzu was about to take out the container and start harvesting his feast, but he found that the atmosphere on the scene seemed a little wrong. Well, it's very depressing. The depressed Kinzu felt a little throbbing in his heart. Without rushing to do it, Kinzu slowly moved forward to the front of the lobsters. He wanted to see how big the leader was and how powerful he was. When he got closer, Kinzu was a little confused. Although the leader's body length generally reached about 1 meter, it was not too abnormal, right? Just when he was confused, the group of big lobsters in front of him slowly stopped, waving their big claws, as if showing their bravery. Kinzu was stunned when he saw this. Did they see him? Just when he was about to make a move, Kinzu heard another strange sound. Turning his head to look, even though Kinzu was now a snake, he felt that his jaw was about to drop. What the hell is that? In Kinzu's surprised and weird eyes, rows of sea crabs as big as millstones appeared in front of Kinzu. And looking at the size, it seems, it's the king crab. Australian king crab, also known as giant shore crab, is native to the Bass Strait of Australia. King crab is the best seafood and the king of crabs. It can usually be fried with ginger and scallions or used to make porridge. However, there is another simple way in Australia, which is to use king crab to make soup directly. Cut the whole crab into several large pieces and cook it directly with clear soup. After it is cooked, take the crab out and eat it. The deliciousness of the crab meat is simply indescribable, and every bite is so full. After eating almost, drink some soup. The soup is very clear, but it complements the thick crab meat. And these guys are the heaviest crabs in the world. The average weight is between 2 kilograms and 5 kilograms, and it is estimated that it will take about 10 years to grow to 7 or 8 kilograms. The largest king crab known so far weighs 36 kilograms, the width of the carapace reaches more than 60 centimeters, and the 2 large claws can reach 1.5 meters when they are spread out. For example, the group of guys in front of him. Looking at the group of king crabs leading the way, the small ones behind were too far away, so Kinzu couldn't see how big they were. But the largest ones in front, according to Kinzu's estimation, had carapaces of about 80 to 90 centimeters, which was really scary. Before Kinzu could come back to his senses from his daze, the scene changed again. The 2 sides that had arrived at the battlefield, after a brief contact, quickly launched a bloody hand-to-hand fight. For a while, the scene was in chaos, with lobsters and king crabs entangled everywhere. Damn it, all of you stop it. Kinzu got anxious when he saw it. Damn, if you guys get injured, I won't be able to sell it. Regardless of why the 2 sides were fighting, Kinzu placed 2 containers upright on the open space, opened the door, and quickly started the action. First, the big guys on both sides were thrown in by Kinzu with their tails. Because he was afraid that these big guys would continue to fight in the container, Kinzu divided the 2 big guys into 2 containers. Although it was a bit troublesome, there was nothing that could be done about it. After all, whether they were maimed or killed, the one who suffered was Kinzu. After being thrown into the container, these big guys were still not honest, and they jumped one by one to get out. But they were far inferior to those sea fish. In the seawater, sea fish could react quickly and swim out. and they could only jump non-stop, but they could not jump out of the container that was erected and became 5 or 6 meters high. Second update, Chapter 621, Going Out to Sea. Although some of these guys resisted, their claws were clamped on Kinzu's big tail, which was no different from tickling. With just a slight lift, the lobster clamped on the tail could be lifted up, and then placed on the mouth of the container and tapped lightly, and the job was done perfectly. When Kinzu put away the container, there were still dense lobsters and king crabs fighting in chaos on the seabed in front of him. MMP, these are all money. Looking at the lobsters and king crabs with their claws removed in front of him, Kinzu's heart was like a knife. No, it can't be wasted like this. Kinzu made up his mind and put the container away, and his consciousness also switched to reality. As soon as his consciousness came back, Kinzu felt that his body seemed to be oppressed by something. He opened his eyes, and what appeared in front of him was the little girl's big watery eyes. "Little girl, why don't you go play? You scared me." Touching the little girl's pigtails that Eva had carefully combed, Kinzu asked with a smile. "It's snowing outside, Daha and Da are both sleeping late, and there's no one to play with me." The little girl pouted and complained to her uncle about the little guys. Kinzu turned his head and looked to their side. In the corner, the little guys were sleeping soundly around the fireplace. Seeing that they were sleeping so soundly, with their bellies rising and falling, Kinzu couldn't bear to disturb them, so he asked, "They are sleeping, why don't you sleep, little girl?" The little girl shook her head. "Shirley is not sleepy, and can't sleep." Kinzu scratched his head a little. He couldn't delay. If he went a little later, maybe only a group of defective products would be left. But what about the little girl in front of him? As if she noticed the tangle in Kinzu's expression, the little girl's eyes lit up and she asked tentatively, "Uncle, do you have something to do?" Kinzu nodded. He thought the little girl would be considerate and let him go first, but Shirley clapped her hands and said, "Yeah, that's great, Uncle, can you take me with you? I want to go out too." Putting on a coat and a felt hat, Kinzu also put a big coat on the little girl. "Little girl, it's so windy outside, can we not go?" Opening the door of the villa, feeling the cold wind outside, Kinzu tried to make a final effort. Shirley poked her little head out of the big coat, looked at the crystal white snow flying outside, and said excitedly, "Uncle, let's go quickly, I'm not cold." Kinzu looked expectantly at Dale next to him, hoping that Dale could also help persuade the little girl. Unexpectedly, Dale shrugged and gave him a helpless expression. It was okay for her to fight, but coaxing a child? Forget it. Sighing helplessly, Kinzu picked up the little girl. Eva didn't know where she ran away. He really didn't know how to persuade people. There was no way. Looking at the situation, it would definitely not work if he didn't take her. Facing the falling snow, Kinzu hugged the little girl and ran quickly to the dock. On the dock, Will had been waiting for a long time in the wind and snow with an umbrella. Seeing Kinzu come in, he hurried over to him, holding an umbrella for Kinzu and asking, "Boss, the fishing boat is ready. Shall we set off now?" Kinzu didn't say anything, holding the little girl and quickly boarding the deck in No. 1. After putting the little girl down in the cabin, he turned back and said to Will, "According to the coordinates I gave you, start the boat quickly, the faster the better." Seeing Kinzu's anxiety, Will didn't dare to neglect it. He waved at Simon and turned around and rushed into the cab. With a loud whistle, the fishing boat slowly left the dock and drove towards the target designated by Kinzu. After instructing Dale to take good care of the little girl, Kinzu closed his eyes and switched his vision to cheese again. Although there was no leader to lead, the war between the lobster and the emperor crab was not over, but rather it was getting more and more intense. Looking at the two sides still fighting in front of him, Kinzu scratched his head. He couldn't figure out what kind of hatred could cause the two races to start such a big war. And judging from the scale, it would take more than a day or two to gather them. Even if Kinzu took down the leader, more than 100 big and small leaders, it only caused a small wave, and the main force still rushed forward one after another. In just a few minutes, both sides lost more than a few hundred people, which made Kinzu's heart bleed. He didn't care about so much, and directly placed his huge body between the two sides, hoping to slow down the offensive of both sides and buy as much time as possible for himself. But who would have thought that these big lobsters and crabs that usually turned around and ran away when they saw him could now ignore his pressure, raise their two big claws, and directly greet Kinzu. Seeing this, Kinzu was not angry but happy. "Yes, that's it, keep fighting, anyway, my body is itchy, it's good to scratch it for me." Just when he was proudly thinking that he had separated the two sides, a scene that surprised him appeared. The lobster, which had been unable to be attacked for a long time, supported its body with its two big claws and pushed forward. It actually jumped over Kinzu's body, which was as thick as a bucket, and rushed towards the big crab on the other side. Looking at the big lobsters jumping over his body, Kinzu felt depressed. When did lobsters become so smart? Just when he was racking his brains for these two troublesome guys, Dale's gentle voice suddenly came to his ears. "Boss, Uncle Will wants to see you." Coming back to his senses, Kinzu temporarily put aside the things here, opened his eyes and looked at Will standing beside him. "What's wrong? Have we arrived yet?" Will bowed and nodded upon hearing this. "Yes, boss, we will be there soon." "What do we need to do?" Kinzu was delighted and quickly stood up and said with a smile, "Great. Is that fishing net I asked you to prepare ready?" Will was stunned and looked a little puzzled, but still said, "It's ready." "That's good. Let's go and take a look." With that, Kinzu ran out. Will hurriedly followed him, but was thinking in his mind, is the boss really going to cast the net? But in this weather, there are no fish in the near sea. Seeing Kinzu and the others go out, the little girl who was looking around curiously wanted to follow them, but was pulled back by Dale. "Aunt Dale, I want to take a look." The little girl looked at Dale pitifully. Dale shook her head silently and didn't say anything, but the meaning was already very clear. Extra chapter for the helmsman James Y000, 2/2, chapter 622 Harvest. After Kinzu came to the cab, he quickly determined the location of the net by comparing it with the small map in his mind. "Come on, Will, let's put the net down from here. The net should be lowered to the bottom. Just pull it along here." Kinzu pointed to the location shown in the fish finder and instructed Will. Will agreed and looked at the fish finder, but found nothing. Looking at his puzzled eyes, Kinzu smiled and said nothing. He would know after a while. The fishing boat soon arrived at the sea area designated by Kinzu. Will waved his hand decisively, and Simon immediately ejected the fishing net. After the fishing net entered the water, Kinzu instantly shifted his vision to Cheese. Under Cheese's gaze, the fishing net slowly stretched out and sank after entering the water. After estimating that there was not much deviation in the position and it would definitely be dragged along the bodies of these guys, Kinzu no longer paid attention to it, but quickly withdrew to the side. "Boss, the pressure is starting to rise. Some fish have been caught." Will looked at Kinzu with a strange look on his face. He moved his eyes away from the dashboard and moved them to Kinzu next to him. He couldn't figure out how he knew there were fish here. Kinzu opened his eyes, smiled and said nothing. According to the scale of the lobsters and king crabs below, there are at least tens of thousands of them. If he can earn half of them this time, he will have enough money for the new year this year. Thinking of the new year, Kinzu's thoughts suddenly went astray. It was already December, and Christmas in the United States was not far away. "Boss, something seems wrong. The pressure has increased a lot." Will's voice interrupted Kinzu's meditation. Without looking out, Kinzu switched his vision and saw the scene below clearly. It turned out that the fishing net was hung on a huge reef. This kind of trawling net on the seabed is most afraid of being hung on the reef, which will break the fishing net if it is not handled properly. You know, the price of a fishing net is not cheap. If you do this trip may be in vain. He twisted his body and saw that the fishing net was getting closer and closer. Many lobsters had already fallen out. Kinzu didn't hesitate and just whipped it with his tail. Kinzu used a lot of force with this tail, and the huge reef was smashed to pieces. Will only felt that the hull was slightly lighter, and the pressure of the fishing net instantly returned to normal. "Boss, our fishing net may have been caught on the reef just now." Will's face became very serious, and he looked at the sea with a worried look, not knowing what was going on there. "Don't worry, it's okay." Kinzu smiled and patted Will's shoulder. He knew whether he was okay or not. Seeing that Will wanted to say something, Kinzu waved his hand and interrupted. "Okay, even if it is really scratched, we can't do anything now. Let's collect the net and see." Will nodded and said nothing more. Time passed quickly. After the fishing boat circled along the lobsters and crabs, Kinzu ordered, "Okay, you can collect the nets." Will learned his lesson this time. Since today's matter was arranged by the boss, he just listened to it. Anyway, in this weather, he was not sure how much catch he could get. As the winch on the deck slowly started, the fishing net was pulled up little by little. 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters. When the trawl net was pulled up 50 meters and there was no catch, Will's face looked a little bad. It seems that today's trip was in vain. Will sighed helplessly as he followed Kinzu outside. He hurried out to the sea, not only wasted a trip, but the fishing net might also be broken. But before he could finish thinking, he heard Simon, who was operating the fishing net, suddenly hound loudly. "Boss, come and see, lobsters, so many lobsters." Lobsters? Will's mind was stunned. There are still lobsters now. His first reaction was that he had heard it wrong. His second reaction was forwards, how could it be possible? Without time to think, Will quickly ran to the stern to see if Simon was fooling him. Ha ha, Will, look, there are so many big lobsters." Before he could run to the back deck, he was hugged by the excited Simon. "These are all big lobsters. Even here, they are much more expensive than cod. And looking at the head, it is obvious that there are many top quality ones, so if there are no accidents this time, it can be said that it is a big profit." While talking, the fishing net has been pulled up by the winch, and the dense green lobsters are waving their mighty front claws in the trawl net, trying to hit the uninvited guests in front of them. Not only did they bring me ashore without my consent, but they also arranged for me to live with the enemy. It is even more hateful than that short and black dead crab. Wow, there are crabs. This is the king crab. Oh my god, so many king crabs. When the fishing net was dragged onto the deck, Simon could see clearly that there were countless king crabs on top of the pile of green-shelled lobsters. "Boss, how did you do that?" Will was stunned for a long time, and then he looked at Kinzu beside him with amazement. "Did he dig out the lobster nest?" "But that's not right. If the lobster nest was dug out, where would the crabs come from?" "Don't think too much, hurry up and clean up these things, and try to get another net." Kinzu didn't give Will a chance to continue asking questions, and gave orders directly. When Will and Simon heard this, their hands and feet immediately sped up a lot. At this time, he regretted why he didn't call a few more people over. Kinzu was so anxious to go out to sea, he thought he was going to do something private, so he only brought Simon, who he trusted, but didn't bring anyone else. Who knew that he ran out in such a hurry? It turned out to be fishing. He regretted it. Ignoring Will's wild thoughts, Kinzu put on his gloves and began to join the sorting. However, this time the sorting was much slower and more difficult than sorting sea fish. These big guys don't care about your identity. As long as you dare to touch them, they will wave their claws to give you a hard blow. With the help of fishing tools, Kinzu and the other two worked for nearly an hour before they finished sorting these lobsters and crabs one by one. In this net, not counting the dead and the disabled, nearly 1,500 green-shelled lobsters and more than 1,000 king crabs were harvested. The total weight of the lobsters alone is more than 10,000 kilograms, and the king crabs are even more terrifying. Although there are only more than 1,000 king crabs, the total weight is higher than that of the lobsters, reaching nearly 20,000 kilograms. Thanks to the support of the barbaric Shayamai, today is the 4th update, and an extra update for Shinxin's father, the helmsman, 1/2. Chapter 623 return. That is to say, the average weight of a lobster is close to 10 kilograms. And the average weight of a king crab is close to 20 kilograms. What does this mean? They are all top quality. Of course, it is impossible for everyone to be so average. Kinzu saw a big crab with a carapace of more than 60 centimeters, and next to it, there was a small crab with a carapace of only more than 30 centimeters. "Boss, these guys are too big, aren't they?" After Will cleaned up the deck, he washed his hands and walked to Kinzu, with shock written all over his face. Kinzu smiled and said, "These are not the biggest ones. The biggest ones have been picked up. Okay, let's clean up and prepare to cast another net." After saying that, he ignored Will's face full of surprise, wiped the water on his hands, and led the way to the cab. Picked up by others. Will stood on the deck, muttering to himself. He always felt that there was something wrong with this. "Hey, man, why are you still in a daze? I feel it." Kinzu stood at the door of the cab and shouted from a distance. "Here I come." Will came back to his senses, shook off the snow on his body, and quickened his pace to catch up. At this time, the sky was still full of snowflakes, and even the deck would soon be covered with a layer of crystal snowflakes if it was not cleaned in time. Under Will's skilled control, the deck one turned around in the sea in front of it in the face of the wind and snow, and returned to the previous route. "Go a little further to the left, yes, right here, cast the net." Following Kinzu's order, Simon skillfully ejected the fishing net. After drawing a beautiful arc in the air, it fell into the sea with a bang and quickly sank to the bottom of the sea. "Boss, what is under here? Why are there so many lobsters?" Will couldn't suppress his curiosity. After ejecting the fishing net, he approached Kinzu and asked expectantly. "You ask me? Who should I ask?" Kinzu shrugged his shoulders very casually. He also wanted to know why. Should I tell him now that there is a group of lobsters fighting with a group of king crabs under the sea? Don't joke, even if you tell him, he won't believe it, and will think you are fooling him. So Kinzu didn't plan to tell the truth at all. Will was a little depressed to get such a seemingly plausible answer, but he didn't ask anything. Some things are better not to know. This time the trawling took a long time. After almost catching all the remaining lobsters and king crabs, Kinzu suddenly found a group of fish that looked familiar in front of him. Queen parrotfish. A large group of colorful queen parrotfish were foraging in the water grass in front. Various species gathered together, which looked particularly pleasing to the eye. Even the blue-line parrotfish that Kinzu caught last time, he found a lot of them. Opening his eyes, Kinzu looked at Will in front of him and urged, "Quick, speed up the fishing boat." Will didn't hesitate at all when he heard it. He pushed the joystick with his hand, and the fishing boat instantly accelerated. While the group of queen parrotfish were still unaware, the trawling net covered them with lightning speed. Well, the results are very rich. Kinzu estimated that only one lucky person reacted in time and escaped quickly. Although the others also reacted, they were caught tightly before they could escape the range of the trawl. Okay, it's almost time to close the net. Kinzu raised his hand to check the time. It was almost noon. If he closed the net now, he should be able to catch up to lunch. Hearing Kinzu's instructions, Simon began to close the net, and the winch on the deck made a creaking sound again. "Uncle!" Kinzu heard a weak cry when passing the cabin door. Looking back, the little girl looked at him expectantly, and her big eyes were full of grievances. Looking at Dale standing at the door, her face was really helpless. Dale had no temper for this little ancestor. She couldn't beat him or scold him, so she could only coax him. But she could do everything except coaxing children. "What's wrong, little girl? You can't make trouble." Kinzu walked slowly to the door of the cabin, shook off the snow on his coat, and looked at the little girl with a smile. Seeing that Kinzu was not angry, Shirley became a lot bolder, pouting her little mouth and said a little depressed, "Uncle, it's so stuffy in here, I also want to go see the lobster." The first sentence was fine, but the second sentence exposed her thoughts. It seems that the little girl just heard Simon's call, and she wanted to go out to see something, and now she wants it even more. Kinzu scratched his head when he heard it. In fact, it was not a big deal to go out. The main reason was that it was windy outside and he was afraid that the little girl would catch a cold, so he didn't let her go out. After hesitating for a long time, he finally compromised under the pitiful eyes of the little girl. "Okay, you can go out, wrap up my clothes." Indicating to Dale next to him to hold Shirley, Kinzu helped her wrap her hat and down jacket, and then took the lead to walk out of the cabin. As soon as the hatch was opened, a wisp of cold wind blew in. Kinzu looked at the little girl with some concern. Seeing that she didn't react, he breathed a sigh of relief. On the rear deck, the winch had already pulled up the fishing net. It was another net full of large lobsters, which made Will and Simon's eyes light up. "Quick, bring the things over." Kinzu waved at Simon and joined the sorting. "Hey, boss, look, what is this?" Will shouted loudly at Kinzu, holding a blue-line parrotfish that was still jumping around. Although Kinzu already knew the result, he still pretended to be surprised and asked, "Is this a blue-line parrotfish? Were you also caught together?" Will nodded excitedly, stretched out his hand to the front deck and said with a smile, "Boss, it seems that we really have a bumper harvest. We can catch so many of such a scarce thing." Following his hand, Kinzu also saw the harvest this time. There were more than 100 queen parrotfish. Although they were of different sizes, they were generally not small. At least, they reached the commercial standard. "Ha, pack up quickly and go back to give you bonuses." The purpose of this trip was basically achieved, and Kinzu was in a good mood. However, when it came to giving bonuses, Will's face was a little embarrassed. Kinzu thought about it for a while and understood it, so he smiled and said, "Don't worry, everyone will have a share." Hearing this, Will breathed a sigh of relief, but felt a little embarrassed. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Boss, let's do this. Give them the money and deduct it from our share." Today is the 5th update, an extra update for Shinxin's father, the helmsman, 2 halves. 10,000 updates are completed. Please subscribe. It's Monday soon. Please subscribe and reward for the new week. Si escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significa lo descarga and y subieron sin esfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrarás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 624 Strange Beats. Subscribe and recommend on Monday. Kinzu didn't make it difficult for Will to get the bonus. Anyway, it wasn't much money, not even a fraction of what he earned this time. He also understood Will's thoughts. After all, going out to sea is everyone's business. You didn't let us go for no reason, but you took your apprentice to get the bonus. Anyone would complain about this. If he didn't handle it well, his position as the director of the fishery would be over. So Kinzu waved his hand and treated everyone equally regardless of whether they came or not. Of course, he also told Will privately that if he had any private matters in the future, he would give other instructions. Seeing that the catch had been almost cleaned up, Kinzu washed his hands, looked at the little girl beside him, and said with a smile, "How is it? Uncle is right, this is nothing to see." Shirley blinked her big eyes and said puzzledly, "No, I think it's very interesting. Look at that big crab, it wants to pinch Uncle Simon." Kinzu was a little embarrassed. "Is this interesting?" He looked at Dale holding the little girl. "Are we not keeping up with the times?" After sending the little girl back to the cabin, Kinzu waited for Will to pack up and come over, and then told him to return. When Will went to the cockpit and turned the fishing boat around, Kinzu hid in the cabin. He was not in a hurry to sort out the lobsters in the warehouse with Simon, and first switched his vision to Cheese. Because just now, he received the induction of Cheese, and it seemed that he had something to ask him. After the vision shifted, Kinzu found something wrong. Because in front of him, there appeared a lobster that was twice as long as an ordinary lobster. However, now this guy is dead, and only a corpse appeared. What the hell is this? Kinzu was a little stunned, and gently picked up the big guy with his tail. The body of the big lobster was turned over, and Kinzu saw clearly why he was dead. Nonsense, the whole head is flat, it would be strange if he didn't die. But why is there still a big guy here that has not been discovered? Kinzu was puzzled. Just as he was wondering, he saw a shiny object appear under the body of the lobster. With a thought, his tail picked up the object. Kinzu leaned forward to take a closer look. It feels so familiar. Kinzu was a little confused. He seemed to have seen something similar somewhere. Wait. Kinzu suddenly remembered that Cheese seemed to have given him a similar thing at the door of the villa that day. Yes, the same thing. But, it doesn't matter. Kinzu let out a long breath. What's the use of the same thing? Maybe it's mass-produced. It's not ancient times now. It's rare to see the same thing. Kinzu picked up the bead with his mouth and looked at the huge body of the lobster. For some reason, he suddenly didn't feel that it could be used as food. It seems that the one lying there is a fellow. Kinzu shook his head quickly and threw this absurd idea out of his mind. Slowly floating to the surface, Cheese stuck close to the side of the fishing boat, and threw the beads directly into a bedroom where no one was paying attention. As for why the bedroom window was open, of course, Kinzu had already gone in one step ahead. Picking up the emerald green beads rolling on the ground, Kinzu looked at them in front of his eyes for a long time, and always felt that they were familiar. This feeling was definitely not as simple as Kinzu had seen the same beads before. It seemed that he knew how to use this thing. But unfortunately, he just couldn't remember it. The north wind was still blowing, but the snowflakes gradually stopped. Accompanied by the heart-piercing north wind, Deki no one slowly docked at the dock of the manor. Opening the cabin door, a gust of cold wind whistled. Kinzu straightened the collar of his coat, hugged the little girl, took Dale, and walked out behind Will. As for the matter that was still entangled just now, he had temporarily put it aside. Under the dock, Aiden and Hubbard, who had been waiting here for a long time, saw Kinzu and his men coming down and hurriedly ran onto the boat to help. It is said that today's catch is good, but it has not been sorted out yet. Of course, this is not the key point. The key point is that they have heard that Captain Will did not call the three of them this time because of the danger, but with the catch, the boss gave them a share of the bonus. This made these straightforward foreigners respect Will, the black-bellied old man, even more. Faced with this result, Kinzu curled his lips but did not say anything. You know, he spent more than $60,000. In order to celebrate today's harvest, Kinzu waved his hand and gave 5 fishermen a bonus of $20,000 each. Originally, he really didn't want to give Will an extra 10,000, but Will said he didn't want anything. After a moment of arguing, Kinzu gave up. Boss, how much did you catch today? Why are you so anxious to call me over? Next to a refrigerated truck, Chenmu rubbed his tired eyes and asked Kinzu weakly. He went to bed a little late yesterday and felt like he couldn't hold on any longer. Alas, he is getting old. Back then, he could still go to work energetically the next day even if he stayed up all night, let alone stay up late. Kinzu didn't know what this guy was thinking, otherwise he would have kicked him. You're old. I'm only a few years younger than you. This is not the point. The point is that I am still a teenager. How can you say I am old? But Kinzu didn't hear it, so all of this is just assumption and is not true. After chatting with Chenmu for a while, Will took Simon and started to unload things. The first to appear, of course, were the boxes of large lobsters with rings on them. As boxes of fresh lobsters were lifted onto the dog, Chenmu, who was leaning on the front of the car and chatting with Kinzu, stumbled and almost fell. Boss, where did you get this? Chenmu stood firm and looked at Kinzu with a strange look on his face, not knowing what to say. It's not lobster catching season now. Where do so many big lobsters come from? Is this a magic trick? Where did you get them? Kinzu looked at him as if he was an idiot, and pointed at the big lobsters being unloaded from the fishing boat. Didn't they just come from the fishing boat? Where else can they come from? Chenmu opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything. I know you just unloaded them from the fishing boat. I want to ask you where you got these lobsters. Before he could think of how to put it, a box of things that Simon brought down from behind attracted his attention again. Boss, is this king crab? Chenmu ran over excitedly, picked up the box and moved it to the car, and didn't forget to say, well, boss, I'll take this first. It's Monday, a new week has begun. Please subscribe, recommend and reward. Chapter 625a. Sudden thought. Seeing Chenmu's look of picking up a treasure, Kinzu couldn't help but twitch his mouth, but he didn't say anything, just folded his arms and watched him busy. When Chenmu excitedly loaded several boxes of king crabs onto the refrigerated truck, he turned around and saw Simon carrying several boxes of larger king crabs down. Here, there are more? Chenmu was a little dazed. What was going on today? Seeing this, Simon put the box down and said to Chenmu with a smile, Chen, don't worry, there are still a lot of them on top. The ones coming down now are the smallest ones, and the big ones are still on top. These are still small ones? Chenmu looked at the two king crabs with a carapace diameter of 40 centimeters in the box, and his mouth unconsciously turned into an O shape. After Simon finished speaking, he ignored Chenmu's surprise, smiled at him, and turned around to continue working. Boss, these are all what you just got back from the sea? Chenmu came to Kinzu, with a look of amazement and curiosity. No. Kinzu waved his hand, and when Chenmu just breathed a sigh of relief, he smiled and said, this is only part of it. There are some good things that will be delivered later. Are there any more good things? Chenmu's eyes brightened even more. Yeah, Kinzu nodded, there are also some giant groups and stonefish. Stonefish? Chenmu frowned. Giant groups are good things, but as for stonefish, not many people eat it here. Oh? Kinzu was stunned, and asked with some doubts. Not many. But don't those fishery companies always buy stonefish? And the price is quite expensive. Chenmu smiled and waved his hand. Boss, acquisition is acquisition, they can resell it, but the Americans don't eat much of it. Without waiting for Kinzu to continue asking, Chenmu smiled and said, in fact, to put it bluntly, it's because of the different cooking methods. Stonefish is mainly used for steaming and stewing, and you know that they eat here, except for frying or boiling. After listening to Chenmu's explanation, Kinzu understood the reason. But now that he understood, what should he do? Should he throw the fish away? Noticing Kinzu's embarrassment, Chenmu pondered for a while and suggested, Boss, don't you have a restaurant in China? Just arrange for air transportation. Kinzu's eyes lit up. This is a solution. The price of stonefish in China is not low. After this matter was resolved, Chenmu came up to him with a licking face and asked expectantly, Boss, when will you give me those groupers? This fish is very popular in the United States. Kinzu was a little amused and patted his shoulder. Don't worry, they will be delivered tonight. Chenmu heard this and breathed a sigh of relief, and said, by the way, boss, when will you go out to sea again? We still need all kinds of tuna. Wait, go out to sea in this weather? You are not afraid of freezing me to death? Kinzu rolled his eyes and ignored this greedy guy. At noon, Kinzu was not polite. He picked out a lobster that was more than 70 centimeters long from that pile of lobsters and handed it to Chen Mu. "Boss, what are you doing?" Chen Mu subconsciously took the lobster and looked at Kinzu blankly. "Go make it. We'll eat this for lunch," Kinzu said as if it was a matter of course. "No," Chen Mu was a little uneasy. "Boss, I'm a guest, right?" Kinzu touched his nose and kindly reminded him, "You also said that I'm the boss." Chen Mu was speechless, and walked towards the villa with a sad and angry face, muttering about the evil capitalists. The skills of a Michelin 3-star chef are really not comparable to ordinary people. An ordinary baked lobster almost made Kinzu bite his tongue. "Brother Chen, your skills are really this," Kinzu said, giving Chen Mu a thumbs up, with a face full of admiration. Chen Mu waved his hand modestly and said with a smile, "The main reason is that the ingredients are good. Our ancestors have said so." Kinzu smiled and was about to say something when Shirley beside him interrupted and asked, "Uncle, what does it mean that a good cook cannot cook without rice?" Kinzu was stunned and touched the little girl's head and explained, "This is a Chinese idiom, which means that even a smart and capable chef cannot cook a good meal without rice." The little girl nodded as if she understood it, as if she thought the sentence was very interesting. Seeing this, Kinzu touched his chin thoughtfully. The little girl could not speak Chinese, which was a bit of a problem. In any case, she had Chinese blood flowing in her body, and it was not enough to just speak English. "Well, it seems that I have to find an opportunity to teach the little girl Chinese." If Shirley knew that her casual question had given her something to do, I wonder if she would regret being too talkative. After lunch, the refrigerated trucks brought by Chen Mu drove away one after another. They had to transport these lobsters back first. If they could be sold alive, they would definitely make more money than if they were dead. As for Chen Mu, he was kept by Kinzu. Because just now, while eating, he had already sent all the containers back to the beach not far away. When Will and Simon followed Kinzu to a beach covered with snow, they were completely stunned when they saw the 2 containers soaked in the seawater. After being shocked, Simon asked in surprise, "Boss, when was this shipped here?" "Oh, this was sent by my friend. They just passed by here and left it here," Kinzu said calmly. That serious look can really scare many people. Simon scratched his hair in confusion. Was there really a ship passing by here just now? Why didn't I hear any sound? However, when Simon looked up and saw Kinzu's serious look, he immediately believed it. Maybe he really didn't hear it. Compared to the simple Simon, Will obviously thought more. He looked deeply at Kinzu, who looked calm in front of him, and his heart was like a raging sea, and he couldn't calm down for a long time. Regarding Kinzu's words that a ship passed by and dropped the containers, he could pat his chest to guarantee that there was absolutely no ship approaching the nearby sea area. Although he thought a lot in his mind, Will didn't show it. As for why he was able to get several containers here quietly, he had his own ideas in his mind. Kinzu didn't care what they thought. Seeing that the 2 seemed to accept his words, he hurriedly ordered, "Go and get the trailer and tow these 2 containers up." After a while, Simon drove the ranch pickup over, and with the help of several people, the 2 containers were soon towed to the beach. Fin DS captulo muchas gracias por la hasta el final. No se olviden dar like buscarmos contenido exclusivo y exeo inmediato. Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon. Recuerda, cada like, suscripción nos anima a continuar. Gracias a todos, nos vemos en el próximo video.